I do apologize for the accommodations. We got bumped. We were going to be in the town council chambers, and the zoning board, it's just meeting right this second, has a regular meeting there. And it's very hard to find time for all the council, the committee members and the administration to have a time that works, and so this was the best we could do, and we wanted to get this done sooner rather than later. So let me begin by introducing myself and the committee members, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we want to try to accomplish today. My name is Tony Palumbo. I'm an at-large counselor here, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Human Services.
I'm Aaron Dushku, also an at-large counselor. I'm the vice chair of this committee.
My name is Michael DeToli. I'm the secretary of the committee. And just to get this out of the way, I'm also a coach with Watertown Youth Baseball. I've been a coach with Watertown Youth Football. Watertown Youth Hockey I've also coached. And I've been a volunteer for soccer, so I'm with you guys.
And he is also an at-large counselor. And just to recognize the other colleagues in the room, at-large counselor Susan Falkoff is with us, and District D counselor Kenny Woodland is with us. And then from the administration, we have Peter Santella, the Director of Recreation, and Mr. Laeth, excuse me, the athletic, the director from Watertown School Department. Is there anybody I'm missing who's okay? So what are we here to do? I'm going to read the purpose of the meeting is a discussion to review and evaluate the structure for scheduling the use of town fields. So I and my colleagues in the council have received a lot of emails regarding from coaches from different of the Watertown community teams, whether it be primarily we've gotten a lot from soccer, but the other teams like lacrosse and baseball and so forth are all affected by this. So that came to a point where we were getting so much input, so many emails that we thought it would be wise to have a discussion about this. So let me just tell you what my purpose, what I would like to see happen, and then we'll have our two colleagues who also speak to the issue. I'm hoping that we can have a discussion about the present schedule that is being used. The prioritization is what I see it as. The prioritization that's being used, and whether that prioritization is meeting the needs of Watertown residents. I'm hoping that we could have a discussion that stays focused on what those needs are and stays focused on whether the schedule, the prioritization that's been developed by the Recreation Department meets those needs. I know there's been a lot of emails back and forth. I will ask at one point for some very specific examples of what the concerns might be, but I thought that would be best if we first heard from a couple of people just to help us get clear on what are the major concerns, what are the issues that people are most concerned about, generally what they are. And we record those, then talk about what we might be able to do with that, and then if there's some specific examples that we can use, that people would be willing to share, we want to talk about those too. I don't know if either one of my colleagues want to say a few words about their thoughts about what we're going to do.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, I mean, you did a very good job of, I think, explaining where we are right now, and I like the idea also of not necessarily spending a ton of time on our past grievances. I mean, those have to come out, but I don't think we should. It would be very productive for us to spend a lot of time yelling at each other here tonight. And I'd like to talk about the policy. There is a standing policy. It's attached to every permit application, and thank you, Mr. Santola, for sending us that. The policy also includes, the application also includes a timeline, which was not on the timeline is on the first page, and I think sometimes the timeline comes into play as a problem, because people might get it in, get their permit application in, but we might be waiting on somebody else. I think we should talk about that. So those are the current policies that govern our field prioritization, and I think that's a good way, that's a good place to start in our discussion. I'm also a parent of a Watertown High School graduate, and also a 13-year-old daughter who plays soccer, and I have a son who plays football and a son who plays baseball. So I'm very involved in Watertown sports as a parent and a volunteer.
I'll just state, yeah, I mean, similar, my goals are the same as that were stated. You know, I've been hearing concerns from a lot of different places about a lot of different issues. I know ultimately, you know, in a perfect world, we'd have a lot of fields and everyone would be able to use them whenever they could. I'm also the parent of 2 children who are involved in many, many youth sports, so obviously I feel that there's, you know, a lot to gain by having access to the fields at appropriate times, so that's, you know, that's important, and it's great to know that there's so many people in the community that have the well-being of children and youth in mind, so thank you all for that.
Okay, before we begin, I wonder if Mr. Leahup would like to say anything, just as in general?
Yes, sure. Thank you for everybody for coming tonight. It's a big piece. I know we're all trying to work together there. I hope everybody understands that. We rely on youth programs so much in regards to being our feeder programs. And I appreciate all the things you do. Some of our coaches work very well with you. Other coaches maybe not work as well. So hopefully we can work on the relationship there, because as I said, the strength of our program is how strong all the youth programs are. That's the key for us.
Good. Peter, do you have any opening? No. So I just wanted to say, I am a parent, but my kids have long gone from youth sports. But do people have a general sense, before we get into the specifics, to have the general sense of the fields, who uses the fields, how many fields we have, the seasons, do people know how many youth groups we have besides the besides the schools? We know we have a youth lacrosse team, we have a youth soccer team, we have a youth baseball team, and we have a youth lacrosse team. Did I say that twice? Yeah. So who am I missing? There's 4.
Football?
Football, youth football. Thank you. I apologize. Thank you. So we know that, right? We have only X number, as Michael said, we only have X number of fields in town. So there's no sort of preliminary information. You're all pretty much aware of what goes on, right?
Any preliminary information you have about sort of the extent of the shortfall and how much crowding are you going to get?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're gonna
Yeah,
get
this is the second meeting also we've had on
Yes.
the topic. We had a meeting last September where we started talking about some of these matters. That was the meeting where we talked about potentially bringing in some temporary lighting solutions.
Oh, I remember that.
And that, for a couple of reasons, was discarded as an idea. So that's another thing I don't know if we should really spend a ton of time talking about tonight, because we do have some I think really good plans for capital programs for lighting and for fields. Some of those are starting to come together, but I think this is important.
Well, let's take 2 seconds, and I will ask Peter if he would just tell us, in terms of from the recreation perspective, on just the lights, what new things are going to happen, and we hope to happen, and when they might happen.
Well,
Not the light boxes, which you and I went over already, but the actual, just the lights,
Just the lights.
new lights. Right.
Okay. And again, this is all capital, and this is all dependent on the approval of the town council.
Right.
If, I know we didn't have a great crowd with the recreation presentation, but because we're very acutely aware that with the field situation, if you can't build more fields, then you have to maximize the fields that we have. And the question is, how do you maximize fields that you have? Well, one of the first things is you like them. So that's number one. I know, I don't want to get into this other discussion, but everybody kind of knows where I feel, where turf comes in at the Victory Field Oval. So in the plan right now, because I certainly respect the youth sports and the high school, that we have a very big discrepancy in lights. So in terms of what we have now, we're dealing with it two ways. Number one, in the capital, and again, it all depends on, we're hoping to have the Victory Field renovation moving forward. We have a meeting, I think, on the 31st. Depends on who you talk to, and there's a lot of things going on, a lot of balls in the air, but we're hoping to have lights there. But that's obviously has been kept contentious 3 years ago, and I'm glad we're revisiting. In addition, because I feel we really evaluated the other fields, Philip Powell originally this year was going to get lights at the Grove for the softball. So they're going to get new lights there, because as the softball guys know, that they got wooden lights from 1960, and then they got metal poles in center field. So a couple of years ago, we put that in the capital to redo those lights. But then realized, and obviously youth soccer and others need more lights. Philip Powell, Grove, Arlington was put in the budget for lights. So
What
for
year?
FY18. So it's sitting here, and that all is contingent on the town council. So right now, we have, I think, a $900,000, don't hold me to it, line item, placeholders at all, for lights at Philip Powell. The Grove Street side would get redone, and the Arlington Street side would get new. Now, a lot of people, Council Canal has some pushback, with the neighbors. For those softball who are really old, remember in the 70s, maybe not yet, there was lights at Philip Powell, Arlington, and they played softball there before they moved the field over.
Excuse me, do you guys mind if some of us come in and maybe find a place along the wall? There's about 8 or 10 people out here.
Would it be fair to say that could we condense the chairs in?
Yeah.
Closer to you?
Yes,
You
we
know,
can do that.
back there.
That's a great idea, yeah. Not up for,
And for you guys that just came in, we apologize, this is the only room we could get.
bring up the chairs and let them lean against
To the
them.
library.
You want to see that?
I didn't see your face. Did you get the email about my MVP?
We have to, I just wanted to have more light or more fields, hasn't it?
That could be a long.
So,
Okay,
there has been discussion about different other fields of lights. And when I first got the job 7, 8 years ago, we had the lighting company come out and evaluate what we need to do. So in the next few years, we're going to help and improve all the lighting and all the fields so they're more efficient. One of the things, Council, I would like to mention, I know the retrofitting boxes, because we don't know much
yeah, we
about
don't
it.
need that, right?
Very good.
Okay. All
So
right.
that's in
Thank
the
you.
plan.
I
for
appreciate
FY18.
that. It is important that we know that it may not be around the corner, maybe, depending on how the council votes on the different capital improvement. That's what we talk about, capital improvement projects. But we are here to talk about the policy itself, and so I thought it might be helpful to get a little bit of interaction here from folks. If there's anybody who would like to just have their say about what they think, would it be helpful if I read it?
I have copies.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna, for people who haven't seen it, can you raise your hand so we can get the copies to the right people? Just pass them back.
We made enough copies.
Okay.
And I thought this might be helpful, a nice pie chart.
Okay.
I taught Appleworks in 1985 at Watertown High. Came out pretty nice.
Okay, let's all get, so what we're looking at, and we're primarily focused today on the second sheet of the application, which has the priorities. The priority is up front. There's 10 priorities. And then below it is the cost. And so anybody, Councilor Councilor Woodland would like to say a few words before we begin.
Sure.
I mean, as we begin.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
So let me, y'all got them in your hand?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to just quickly read these. Number 1, town-sponsored activities, that is the Watertown School Department and the Watertown Recreation Department. 2, establish, sanctioned, and approved Watertown youth groups, open to all Watertown residents, for example, the youth football, baseball, softball, soccer, and lacrosse. 3, traditional in-season programs will have priority over programs participating in their non-traditional season. 4, Watertown-based organizations, groups or individuals open to all Watertown residents, 80% or above residency. 5, Watertown-based organizations, groups or individuals open to all Watertown residents, 50% to 79% residency. Watertown-based organizations, groups or individuals open to all Watertown residents, 49% or below residency. Organizations, groups, or individuals, 80% or above residency. Organizations, groups, or individuals, 50% to 75 residency. Organizations, groups, or individuals, 49 or below. And then the Director of Recreation or his or her designee has the flexibility and final say in regarding to field permit assignments. Councilor.
One thing that didn't go on, didn't get included in the copies was on the bottom of the front page of the application, which also says that it also has a timeline for when applications should be accepted by the town and when the permits should be issued. It says for the spring season and summer applications, they should be accepted beginning November 7th. This is for 2016. Permits issued beginning December 12th. So that would have been, for this spring season that we're in now, those permits would have been issued on the 12th and people should have gotten them in by the 7th. For fall, which is coming up, it says fall to winter applications. This is what's coming up. They should be accepted beginning January 3rd, 2017, which is we're well past now, and they'll be issued beginning March 6th, 2017, which is also now in our rearview mirror. So just wanted to mention that too.
Council,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do this periodically. And it doesn't, and again, no disrespect.
That's okay.
It says permits issued beginning. That does not mean we issue all the permits on the 12th.
That's fair.
As Mr. Laif knows, we have a very clear tier, and Mr. Laif, maybe, I don't know if he has a printout, he'll go over that it's very difficult for him to get this schedule. So I have to wait for him, no disrespect to Mike, but he has a lot of balls in the air with the Middlesex League, and let him, so.
Yeah, I'm hoping to pull that out a little bit of this conversation.
Right, but I
think
just
that's
want everybody to know beginning, because I don't want everybody to get the false impression that on the 12th, we're issuing 50, 60 permits.
Okay.
That's not true.
Okay, so speaking now to the issue was first, now generally we're looking at the policy. That's what we wanted to talk about is the policy.
Right.
I'm sorry, what?
You keep passing around what people...
Here they are, they're up here.
We have the pie charts, not the text.
Oh, the text.
Ken,
Some
Ken.
people, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess I want to start by saying, I think procedurally, I was the only counselor.
Please.
So I want to start by saying procedurally, I think I was the only counselor that voted against this referral to committee. And it was based on the presumption that the referral stated that the policy needed to be looked at for some changes. And I'm of the opinion that if we're going to look for some changes, it needs to be because the policy is not acting in accordance with what it's supposed to be doing. It's not living up to its intent. So if we're going to change it, we're presuming that something's wrong with it. So before we can make that presumption, we should probably have some objective data that we can analyze and play against the policy and see if it's actually going to result in something that was never intended. So I think by having the discussion we're about to have, we're making that presumption and not looking at any objective data. So originally I voted against this referral because we didn't have that data, and I figured this first meeting might be presenting the data and looking at it another way, but it just became available this evening and was just sent to the counselors. I don't know if you guys have even seen it, about an hour and a half ago, the breakdown of what each organization in town has per hour on the fields in town. And so now that we have this objective data about who uses the field and when, we can start to make the determination as to whether the policy even needs to be looked at. So is there a problem is usually the first analysis before going into solving a problem. So I don't think we've done that yet. So I think it'd be incumbent upon the committee in terms of procedure to kind of go over what the fiscal year 17 hours were. And so I say fiscal year 17, municipalities do their fiscal years by July 1 to the following June 30th. So that last year of field time, we now have available. So we can see if the numbers that we're going to be discussing tonight are actually living up to the policy. And I think if it's okay with the committee, I can give a couple of highlights to kind of steer the discussion and make a couple things known to the general audience. The first being, as Councilor Palumbo just mentioned, number 1 and 2 in the priority scheduling are for Watertown School Department and Rec Department, and then youth sports. The top 7 biggest users of the fields are Watertown High School, youth baseball, youth soccer, the Watertown High School gym, rec, youth lacrosse, youth football. Now those 7 or 8 combined make up 82.5% of all the field time in Watertown. 82.5%. So those first 2 priorities, or I guess 3 if you count per season, are 83% of our field time right now. So it's fair to say, based on objective data right now, that this policy is living up to those commitments. Now, we could dive into a little bit more, but I think the real reason we're holding this meeting, I don't think it's unfair to say this, is because youth soccer had mentioned, and they've come up to a lot of meetings to mention that they weren't potentially getting a fair shake, and that is completely legitimate. If you think you need more field time and you're not getting your comeuppance, then that's fine. I'm happy to look at that and to see the data on it. And specifically mentioned was that there were some organizations, and from last September's meeting and the testimony from a couple weeks ago, Watertown softball and Watertown Reds were both specifically mentioned as organizations that were given priority over youth soccer. And so that's what is really starting the meeting tonight. And so I think it's important to know that Watertown Youth Soccer in fiscal year 2017 had 2,840 hours scheduled on fields. That represents 19% of every single hour on every single field in Watertown. Only youth baseball and Watertown High School had more. By comparison, the 2 organizations that were cited, and I'm sure they're here tonight because they were cited, and they would probably feel it necessary to come and defend, their organizations. Watertown men's softball had 177 hours. So Watertown Youth Soccer had 16 times more hours than men's softball. The Watertown Reds had 57 scheduled hours this last year, which makes up 50 times. So youth soccer had 50 times more than the Reds. So I'm bringing all this up because I think it's important to put this in perspective. This does not mean, and I hope it doesn't come off this way, that there's not very legitimate grievances. There's times that you don't want, there's days that you don't want, you need to switch fields, you need bigger parts of the fields. Those are all 100% legitimate concerns that we should be addressing as a town. 100%, I have no qualms with that. But pitting or mentioning an organization that is not getting priority based on the numbers, and saying that they don't deserve those, I think is the wrong way to go about it. And further, the town council has its powers enumerated under our town charter, and I think that is going way beyond the scope of what the town council's duties are to try to say and to jump into those issues of bad days, bad times, and all those other those legitimate concerns. I am 100% backing you. Like, you shouldn't have to do late hours for young kids. 100%, we can try to switch that up. But is it the town council's job to do that? I'd say no. So I know it's a ridiculously long opening statement, and it mentioned a lot of things that were previously unknown. But based on the numbers, youth soccer is getting almost 20% of the fields, and I think that's a great thing. You guys have a great organization. There are tons of kids, and they're loving it.
Hours.
Yeah,
Hours, yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's, I'm just saying, I don't want to come from a place, I don't want to be misunderstood as saying that I'm against that, because I'm fully for reforming things, but is it the job of the council? Probably not. Have we identified a problem that we're trying to solve? I don't think so. And I think this data probably needs to be looked at a little bit more before we jump into a whole bunch of grievances about what's happening or about what I just said.
Good. Go ahead.
Just to that point,
You should listen to people. And then-
I think one thing that this pie chart doesn't give me, and you're right, it shows us the hours, but it doesn't show us when those hours are
Exactly.
and what that field is. And I think
Agreed.
for me, sort of my interest in this conversation would be understanding better what the needs are of the different groups
But that's not the policy.
and just making sure that
Yeah.
it makes sense for all the users. And that's just one piece I would add to that.
Well, let me just say that while I understand the data, I actually thought that part of what we're doing here is looking at the policy to see if the policy
Right.
actually is valid. And not see whether the policy is being implemented correctly, but see if there are the residents feel that the policy should be changed. And now, is it our responsibility to hear from you? Yes. Is it our responsibility to make recommendations to the full council? Yes. Is it our responsibility to work with the administration to see if what we suggest, based on what you suggest, happens? Yes. So it's not just for whether the policy reflects, whether the data reflects the policy. The question is whether the policy itself is valid. So that's why we're meeting. So I'm going to go back from this now and open it up to the group.
Yes. Hi, Councillor.
So
My name
now,
is-
on the policy, if we can.
Yeah, no, my name is Mark Leonard. I think probably some of you have seen some of my correspondence. I represent a president of Watertown Youth Soccer. The policy in and of itself, I think, Kenny, one thing you don't mention is your participation in one of the groups.
I'm in men's softball.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So I'm with youth soccer, Kenny's with men's softball. The idea here isn't for people to kind of for it to be adversarial, right? Justin I've known for 100 years. Like, the idea here is not to look around and say, I want you guys to play and you guys not to play. What we have, though, is a problem, right? We have a capacity problem, which frankly this is propagating and condoning, right? When you look at the policy in and of itself, and I'd ask for some clarification to address on the question. So number one is town-sponsored, and nobody disputes the fact that schools should be number one. No argument, no one disputes it, top to bottom, no one disputes it. Number two should be youth organizations, based on residency. But what we have is youth organization, we have schools, and then we have the Watertown Rec Department. And so what happens is the Rec Department has the opportunity, there's no point in having a prioritization if you have somebody that says, Justin, you can pick anybody you want. You're in, right? You're in, you're good. And so then
Could you
we'll
clarify, Mark, what you mean by that?
Well, so if you look at that, I don't know if I can clarify much more. So town-sponsored
I
activities,
understand.
Watertown schools,
I
number
understand
one.
that.
Number two is Watertown Rec
So
Department.
you're saying that's
No
ambiguous?
qualifier.
No qualifier.
No qualifier.
Okay, thank you.
So then we go through the list of prioritization. We go through fairly strict, I think you guys know, I think everybody knows, Watertown Youth Soccer, we represent 760 kids per season. 99.9% of them 99.9% of them are from Watertown, residents of Watertown, so it's a Watertown youth organization. We've grown by 400 kids. We have 2 seasons. We play in the fall, which is the high school season. We play in the spring, which is the championship tournament season. It's pretty much universally known that there's 2 seasons in soccer. If you go to Europe, there's 1 season. It goes from the fall to the spring. You play through the winter. It just doesn't happen here, and that's why there's 2 seasons. It's not that difficult to figure out. But number 2 is we go back to the prioritization. We go through the list of priorities and we say, okay, you get this, you get this, you get this. Number 10. Well, then we can change it whatever way we want to, right? We can make a decision and we can go, okay, if I want this here, I want this here. We have to have a prioritization where it says, pretty scientifically says, the Reds go play at Vic, they do their thing, they're going to play this number of hours, they're going to do X number of sessions at Vic. Youth soccer, one of the things that we had talked about is the first way to maximize the fields is to light them. Actually, the first way to maximize the fields is to maximize the fields. Take the number of teams, take the amount of capacity that teams need to practice, take that and then apply it to the fields that we have. So you know what? There'll be 2 teams on one field. There'll be 3 teams on one field. I know it can't be in the red situation, but in a lot of other sports, you can maximize the use of the fields by having multiple teams on the fields. We don't do it today, but we do it on a minimal basis, and so we're reducing capacity along the way. The problem that we have is a pretty simple one. It's a math equation. We sit down and we look at the number of kids that we have. For those of you that have kids in Watertown, we have 760 kids. No kid is cut. Every kid plays. Every kid plays if they don't have the money. And so what we've been trying to do is make sure that when we bring kids to fields, that we don't have 5 and 6 teams on a field while one group has a lighted field, right? One group gets the prime hours of this, frankly, this is meaningless because we don't have the data behind it. And the data behind it, frankly, is what tells the story. That's incorrect. And so if you use metadata that's incorrect to generate a chart, you're going to come up with the answer that you want. We may have 19% of the hours, but we've got 50% of the participants. And so that's been the conversation that we've had from the very beginning.
I wanted you to focus, if you could, focus on the policy.
So I guess the number 1, what falls under Watertown Rec Department for number 1, and then number 10, how do we qualify in or out groups? As we go through the prioritization, how do we qualify groups in based on the residency?
That was my question, Tony.
I'm sorry, repeat your,
I'm Elodia Thomas, for people that don't know me. That's my question. I would like to know what this means. You know, when Mark says there's no qualifier for the Watertown Rec Department, I would like to know what that means at number 1, and I would like to know what number 10 means.
okay.
First of all, I have no idea what the qualifying means in Watertown Recreation. Well, let me first go back to Councilor Detoli's. And if anybody would like to, tomorrow on the document center, and as we always do, we will have exactly everybody who uses the fields, when they use it, and what time they use it. And we sent that to the town council, you have that. And generally, all the field schedules are on document center. So I'm not sure, let me just finish my point, I didn't interrupt anybody else.
Oh, not ready.
So they're on there. In addition, what I did, and here's a sample, because I knew that youth soccer would probably be reading this. This is the youth soccer schedule from August to June. And you can pass that around. And that's a calendar schedule, and it tells you what fields they're on when they're on it. I don't think I could be any more helpful than that. On the flip side...
But what's the point of this?
Okay, excuse me.
Oh, please.
You have to make a point.
You don't have...
Because Councilor Detoli brought up a point, and I'm just trying, I think it's a very valid point, Councilor. Here is the high school schedule. In terms of the question, I really don't know what you about to qualify the Watertown Recreation. Once you see the Watertown Recreation use, it's really mostly when we have our tennis, and then when when you have the breakdown for Watertown Recreation, whatever the number is. It's basically when we use the tennis, the victory courts, it includes that, it includes some fields, but it's not really not taking any time away. Or it includes our basketball league down there. So you'll see that. You know, the recreation will say, Watertown Recreation, Number 10 is very interesting. I don't know any director or any organization that doesn't have the ability to have some wiggle room. That's what 10 is. So basically, if there's an issue, 40 years in the job, okay? College athletic director, high school athletic director, college coach, high school coach, ran this league out here. So again, not perfect, but this is what I do for a living. And so I had my interview process was 3 days with Mr. Driscoll. So I have been hired because I have expertise in certain fields. And this gives me a little flexibility, okay? And that's what 10 is. That's, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah, I think that the 10 seems to me to be natural for a director of a program to have the flexibility. I just for my own sake, when it says Watertown School Department, which I understand, and then it says Watertown Recreation Department, what are the programs under Watertown Recreation Department that are priority? What is it?
Really not, we don't really. I mean, Mike, we would like to run some programs at Victory on the turf, like a flag 10 football. And we always really have to wait for the high school, and we wait for the youth group. So really, we don't. And you'll see that in the detail. We really
So you
don't.
don't use the fields?
We do use the fields, but like, we'll use the fields after school. You know, we'll use the field after school. And sometimes, when you see recreation, so say there's at Victory, the multi-purpose, if there's a soccer game or a lacrosse game, and we don't want anybody else to use that field, we'll schedule the baseball field, and we'll put that in. It'll say Victory Baseball. So that's where the hours tabulate. But if you look at that, you'll see the breakdown. A lot of it is in the basketball league, and a lot of it is in the tennis. But we're not really taking any priority over it. But again, we are the Watertown Recreation Department. Why wouldn't we have priority? Anyway, that was a little bit.
Okay.
There was a third question about the 80% residency, 50 to 79, 40. That was the question, right?
Right, how do you audit that?
Oh,
Well, we try to get rosters from teams, and again, let's talk about people in the room. The softball and the Reds, they don't have 80% residency, okay?
They don't, sorry, they don't?
no.
No, I just didn't know.
They do not,
Okay,
they do not. But really, no adult group has. So we just go down the barrel, you know what I mean? They are a group that
What
has
do you mean
no-
go down the barrel? That doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry. We go down,
Percentages.
so we go to the next stage, all right?
Oh, down your list.
Down the list. I'm sorry for not using it. We go down the list. Again, Watertown softball's been around, and I'll have, Dave could talk to this, 52 years. And a lot of Watertown people who originally grew up in Watertown, okay, they might not live in Watertown because they can't afford it, they're playing in the league. Watertown Red's the same thing. And I'm not saying their team is 80, their team might be 30, 40%, I don't know. But there's nobody else worth jumping ahead of them. There's no other group that jumps ahead of them. The next one is the Ski and Sports Club, that he's here as well. So we just go down the list. What I'm saying is, there's no outside group, there's no Watertown group that had 80%.
Okay.
So we go to the next thing.
You wanted to be who?
I have my hand up. Just back to the policy.
Yeah.
And just asking about that, like, is it working and is it effective?
Yeah.
I would just say, just on a general level, and I'm a soccer coach, so I care about soccer, but I also care about the culture and the interactions that are happening. I would say there's something's not right. Just as a general register the point, if we're all here now, and we're all here because we love the sport, we need the time, and it hasn't worked out for us to feel good about the access or the time, there is a problem. That's my comment.
All right.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused. Did I hear you say that the baseball people do not use any time that the youth soccer wants?
They share. They
Well,
share.
I mean, that's my question.
Yes, they do share.
I mean, so there's an obvious thing, if you have a choice between Watertown kids and people who once lived in Watertown, seems to me the priority is clear and it ought to go with this. And I think is that the issue you're raising, is that...
It's interesting you break the point. So it's not to the detriment of baseball. So I can see the baseball guys going, hold on a second. It's not to the detriment of baseball. When Peter says share, so let's say the Watertown Reds have the field. So they will take the field, and this is where the hours are a little bit of a misnomer, because you look at the pie chart and go, hey, what will happen is, the way the permit is written, is you will go to Victory Field, the Reds will have the field for all the right reasons, because they're an adult baseball team, and when they hit those line drives, maybe Justin hits a few pop flies, and these are going out to kind of center field, they want to have the room to be able to take care of them. What happens in the permit then is, the permit that's given to Watertown Youth Soccer for 4 teams is from the 40-yard line on the orchard side from 40 through the end zone. So you step onto Victory Field from the 40-yard line to Orchard Street is pretty much the permit that's been given, and then the rest has been given to the field, or to the baseball. Here's the thing. So when we look at the hours, and just as we just talked about the hours just real quick, not all hours are created equal. So those permits start from 4 and they run until 10 o'clock. Ryan is a fine member of society. interesting enough, has a job. And so when you go through the process, he can't be at the field at 4 o'clock. And so when we get hours assigned to us at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and we know that the sessions are going to start at 5 o'clock, you have to look at it in the context of how we score these hours. You could even score the hours. The prime hours are from 6 to 8.
Okay, so the prime hours are 6 to 8. Are you
Right.
saying that those hours of 6 to 8 should only go to soccer?
Not to the detriment of soccer, because I don't think we need all of the hours. I think what happens is that when we sit and we do the permits, we have to figure out what the need is, because I just to make one other point, it's not just based on age. When you look at soccer, there's 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. Let's just say that they're the 3 age groups. They need different size fields. It's like the baseball guys playing on the Little League field. They don't, right? If you guys could do that, you'd be over at Bemis hitting them into Kingdom Come. That's not the game. And so that's kind of where we have to do. The subtlety of this of holding up a list of hours is lost a little bit because the hours don't actually reflect the situation.
I first want to acknowledge that Council Lisa Feltner, the district councilor from District 4, is here tonight. Thank you, District B. Anybody else want to speak about this before we hear other people?
Mark is here too.
Where? Oh,
Wait.
Council President Mark Sideris is joining us too from the zoning board downstairs. He was downstairs.
I just want to reiterate what Steve Kennedy said, and that I feel that many people in the community feel that we pay taxes to support our kids in this community and our adults in this community. But again, it's all about priorities. And so I'm still getting kind of confused about a lot of this. So I just want to reiterate that.
Okay. Council, Mark, there is a seat up front if you'd like. You all right? Okay, well, there's an empty seat if anybody wants to sit besides this. Go ahead, your turn.
Okay, I just have a quick one. I wanted to ask Peter if he could send a link out for the data that you gave to the counselors, because it's always fun to look for documents on the website and look and look and look.
I'd be happy, I wanted to give the courtesy to the town
Yeah.
council, all the documents that we prepared, there's already documents on there, but I'll have it on the document center tomorrow morning.
Okay,
I don't,
a link to it, because
I
it's
just put it
really-
on directly on the document center, and I'll give it, they go in the document center.
Well, how will you title it, Peter?
Yeah, because we got the search
I will
out
put a
was
separate
stinks.
folder with all these
Thank you,
documents.
thank you.
What would you
Appreciate
like me to name it? I'll be happy to.
Well, just
Priority
field
scheduling
usage.
conversation.
Field usage.
Okay.
That will.
I want to hear from, after anybody else, I want to hear from more of the residents or others about the issue. Is there anybody else who wants to talk about field prioritization?
There's a gentleman here.
I had a question. I know right now there's youth baseball going on, youth soccer, youth lacrosse, and now there's a flag tag football program going on. I wonder if these people ever get together and doing any scheduling amongst themselves as far as, because what I see happens is a tremendous amount of conflicts that kids are being put into a choice at the age of 6, 8 years old. Well, I can't play both soccer and baseball because there's too many conflicts. Do these people ever, would it be a good idea to meet, to try to make it that a kid could play 2 or 3 sports during each season? Which would also sort of free up some time if the leagues got together and lacrosse, youth soccer, discuss what do we actually, I know from experience that when requests come in prior to the season, people are looking for just about everything. And as a matter of fact, at one time I used to take all the soccer schedules and I said, just give them to me and I'll find you the space to get all your games in during the season. And you find that people will, I had one person request 32 dates for baseball. I said to him, you only have 36 games. Half of those games should be out of town. What are you asking for all these dates? And he goes, well, people like to come and play here. So, you get people asking for more than they want, and to the detriment of someone that might need more time. But my big thing is that I think kids at a very young age are put into situations where to play 2 sports is almost impossible because of adults not getting together, working together. So lacrosse is on Tuesday, practice on Tuesday and Wednesday, soccer practice is Monday, Thursday, Friday, whatever, just so that kids would have be able to choose, could play in more different activities over the course of the season.
Anybody else who'd like to speak to the issue of the priorities?
I'm
Please.
just a little confused. With the hours used, what percentage of hours are being given to groups outside of Watertown or Watertown youth? Or residents?
Youth have about 83%.
Like 80, okay, so what is this representing? 'Cause I don't understand how that
The
represents.
blue, orange, and gray are the three highest groups.
But that doesn't represent 83%, so what is it?
No, and then the yellow, like the other blue, green, it's the top 8 groups. Watertown High School, youth baseball, soccer.
So I guess what she's
Yeah.
trying to say is, it would probably been a little bit more helpful of a pie chart to show, instead of the number of hours, or also in addition to the percentages of time.
Oh, the actual
Yeah.
percent?
Yeah.
No, 100%.
Because it's very difficult once you start getting to these minuscule numbers to
Yeah.
understand.
Yes.
And also there's duplicating colors, so
Yes.
there's like 4 different blues, and I don't know which one is which.
Right.
Yeah, I have the
In
physical
addition,
breakdown, that's why.
I think my follow-up question is what
Yeah,
hours?
I understand, I'm in marketing, I get that, I'm saying it's.
Ma'am, can I just answer that? So tomorrow, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if you were here, I really did the best I could.
Yeah, I know you passed them.
But here is, I have this, if you guys want to pass this around, this is mine, I need it back. But this is what I'm going to post, and this gives a detailed, easy version of where everybody is.
Will that also show the hours, because there's a lot of talk about the hours and they're not equal?
And that also,
percentage of
I just sent that around. There's a who has the calendar? Can you pass that to the young lady?
I didn't hear what your question was.
So we really tried to, I listened to your questions, good question.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
I'm just trying to understand who's getting the hours, how much of which are going to groups within Watertown as opposed to outside of Watertown? Because there's over 20% going outside of Watertown. Are these the prime hours that we want? I want a better understanding.
Okay, so the question is that the hours that are for number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, are those hours that are prime hours that could be going to our Watertown-based residents, the youth sports?
May
Yeah, you want to answer that? No.
Oh, you want-
I just, if you don't mind, you were asking a question about prime hours?
Yeah.
So this is our 19th season in Watertown. Just a quick little history. I'm from here, my parents still live here. These guys are all from Watertown. We are a Watertown-based team. Many of us have been involved in the high school. Because a lot of you, I think, are looking at us as just, you're an outside. We're not truly an outside group. Like Coach had already said, any adult team, any adult organization is going to have outside people. The past 3 head baseball coaches at Watertown High have all been a member of the Reds, whether they're head coach or a sponsor. Assistant coaches at Watertown High, we've all been there. The prime hours, we've never played before 8 o'clock at night. And this goes back to Mr. Sullivan in the old Babe Ruth League, even with the new turf. So those prime hours, never involved with us. It's been 8 o'clock and beyond. And it is the only, Victory Field is the only big diamond in town that can house a varsity level and above team, league, whatever you want to call it. Moxley Field cannot hold anyone 17 years old and up because of the playground, how small it is. It's just a fact, that's the way it is. And
Okay,
you know,
so you're saying is that you don't begin playing until after 8 o'clock?
yeah, 8 o'clock. I mean, it's pretty much what it's always been since from the beginning.
Is this all Victory Field?
No, that's all the fields.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Tony, my question kind of relates to that. It would be very helpful to have a breakdown of what fields we have in town and what fields can be used for what sport. Because are there fields that are not being used for multiple sports for some reason? I just feel like I don't have enough data to be thoughtful about this process.
So, excellent question. And again, that will be in the document tomorrow. I mean, that's on the website, the different type of fields and what's it used for. But in terms of the calendar, that's going to be, that's a good question, Olivia, for those who don't really know.
But I'm also, I just, maybe I'm not asking the question correctly, Peter, and I'm loaded with cold medicine. I'm also looking for a rationale. Yeah, I'm looking for rationales for different field uses, like
Certainly.
why is this field allowed to be used for this but not this field? I don't know if that even exists, but I'm just trying to get the best information about every field we have in town and how it could be used. And if it's not being used for a particular purpose, why not? Is there a reason?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But again, Joe has answered that. The only field.
I understand for the adult baseball league,
And the
and
high
we do
school
know that
hockey.
you're there because I live there, and we know that you're still rerunning the game sometimes at 11 o'clock at night. So I know you guys, that's your only field.
Okay. All right, folks.
What she means is people.
Folks. All right, ma'am, excuse me, sir. Sir?
Hi, I'm a parent of soccer player, football player, softball player, basketball.
Wow.
Yeah, so,
Best friend.
yes. So very active in youth sports. When I look at this, it doesn't tell me the chart relation in terms of number of participants, and it doesn't tell me whose needs are met and whose aren't. Obviously, we're hearing that youth soccer needs aren't met, and I can speak to my own experience with one of my kids where they had to share fields last fall because there wasn't enough fields. Multiple practices were canceled because some other group had to come in and use the field. So I want to know, how can we move forward, and what groups aren't being met? Youth soccer in particular, I don't know if other groups, their needs aren't being met, but like, how do we solve this, right?
I think that's the rut. my main question is.
It's not a forum for
No,
that.
I think it's a good
Peter,
question.
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
Thank you.
you'd asked me.
No,
Yeah.
okay.
Did you get that?
That question.
Could you restate that question? I
Well,
heard
I
it,
guess,
but
I mean, I'm concerned, I know that youth soccer, we have an issue with fields. I don't know if other sports, my daughter's softball hasn't had an issue that I'm aware of. But what are we gonna do to move forward? Because this is from last fall that we had issues. I can't speak historically, but, but what are we doing?
Okay. Yeah, because Council.
Yeah, I just had a question that is similar to what you guys did. It seems to me another thing this chart doesn't capture is how many participants there are in each of the sports. So if there's 1,000 people participating in youth soccer and there's 30 in something else, then it seems the number of hours doesn't really capture the data that you need to make sense of it.
Okay, Councilor Woodland.
So I just want a couple of comments on the 40-yard line issue. Completely unacceptable. Obviously, you can't put 4 teams inside of 40. Like that's 5 teams inside of 40. But if my understanding is correct, that isn't the norm. That's happened a bunch of like a half dozen times. Again, unacceptable. But I think it should be noted that that's not the norm of what happens. Something that was said in the back by the gentleman and by Mrs. Hare. That is the conversation we should be having. Because we are not meeting the needs of youth soccer and maybe softball and other organizations, it doesn't mean there's a problem with the policy. It could be that we don't have enough fields. So what are we doing about that? That is, I think, the real issue here. It doesn't come down to we should get these fields over another time, because I think, like I've said before, the policy is working as it's intended. And getting more fields is a conversation the council should be having. And it doesn't, diving into what day, what preference the time is, as I've mentioned, is outside the purview, I think, of what the town council does. We issue money to buy budget supplies, but we don't submit the PO orders. So we would, within our purview, to talk about ways to get more fields and provide more opportunities on grass for sports. That makes sense for the council to address, and I think that's where we would ultimately need to go. But again, just because there are needs doesn't mean there's something wrong with the policy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been associated with Watertown men's softball for 35 years as a player, as an umpire. And my question is, what is the problem with Filipello Park? I mean, we've been pushed back to 7:30, and obviously we now have light restrictions. We used to be able to control the lights up until this year, but now they go off at I think it's 10:25 is the light. What is the proposal from soccer? I mean, I went to the field last night to do 2 games. There was no soccer players on that field. I don't know if anybody was scheduled to use it or what, but I mean that was a field that could have been used last night.
There's no players where?
At Filipello Park?
Which side?
Grove.
Yeah, Grove. So we had 3 teams on Arlington. You know why we weren't on Grove? Because we weren't scheduled.
Okay.
So we had 3 teams
Well,
on
I'm just
Arlington.
saying, the thing is this,
I'm just
I've done
telling you.
it over since
We would have been there had we been scheduled.
Since we got moved back in our schedules to 7:30 start time, there's been quite a few nights that I've gotten there, and I'm there almost every Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night. So there aren't teams there. So I don't know, maybe you were right. Maybe it's all about
Right. That's all it is.
rescheduling everybody and stuff like that. But like I said, we've been able to adapt to the 7:30 start time. We used to play 5 nights a week and Sundays, starting at 6 o'clock, 3 games a night. It's gone back. We don't have the teams, we don't have the players. It's harder and harder to get teams to come play. And as you notice that there are programs out there that solicit teams from all over to play in these leagues and stuff like that. We try not to do that, but again, we want to sustain our league, so we do bring in teams from other places. But we're also sponsored by quite a few Watertown businesses. So.
Okay.
So, in the interest of full disclosure, my oldest son plays in the softball. Kenny knows that. So, we're kind of crossing a lot of bridges here. I guess there's a couple of things that I want to kind of get back to. One is you don't get on the turf until 8 o'clock because school finishes at 8, right? So that's what happens. And so when you look at having to get on the turf at 8, the reality of it is there's a U14 team, there's a U16 team, there's a U18 team that didn't get on the turf at 8 o'clock for the Reds to get on. So we have to kind of think about where kind of how this is working out, number one. Number two, we seem like we glossed over the fact that we have organizations. Let's just go back to the policy for a second.
Yeah, let's stick on the policy.
We seem like we have organizations that aren't adhering to the policy, that are getting time on the fields before organizations that are higher on the priority list.
Well, that's what we're trying to.
No, we've already said that there's 2 organizations, men's softball and the Reds. And so in fairness and with all due respect, coming from Watertown, I came to Watertown. So I'm kind of, I passed you like ships in the night. So now I live in Watertown, I pay tax in Watertown, and so when we kind of sit and we look at what we're doing here, we have to figure out if we have a prioritization list. There's a romance aspect of it from Watertown. The league has been around for 53 years. I'm okay with that. But we got 800 kids every season that need somewhere to play. And this isn't just throwing up lights. This isn't throwing up, sowing extra grass. This isn't doing whatever. It's better utilizing the assets that we have today. And that's just a simple fact, right? We look at kind of what we're doing. Nobody uses Filipello on Sunday. Nobody.
Okay. Hub softball doesn't use it?
Who knows?
Okay, so let me.
Oh, Hub softball, of course, because they come in and we rent it to them, but that's a question. I guess that's a question for Peter. How do we have groups that don't adhere to the prioritization get prioritized over other groups if this is the policy?
I guess they don't.
You say they don't.
They say they don't.
All right. Okay, let's hold it right there.
But that's not. But hold on a second.
I think earlier you said that you did. I think that was.
If we're going to have some kind of dialogue here on what the policy is, and somebody brings up something and says, "Hey, the policy's not been adhered to," and he goes, "Yeah, you're right." Is there any kind of then secondary conversation to say, well, why? Why does that make sense? What can we do to make sure that the Reds get the field, that softball gets the field? Because what happens is, as we fast forward back to the fall season, which is a non-traditional fall baseball season, there's very few fields that have lights, right?
We don't play. Watertown men's softball, we end right around Labor Day.
That's hub softball, brother.
So hub softball. So hub softball. If hub softball is gone, well then we won't have the problem that we had last fall, which is great. But I still would like an answer as to why or how groups that aren't adhering to the policy
Mark,
are being
I'm a little
prioritized.
confused.
They are.
Which-
You don't get exclusively.
Which
That's exactly
which
the
team are you talking about? Which group are you talking about, Mark?
So who has less than 80% residency in the room?
No, but then we go down to the next list, because there's no adult group that has 80% residency, Mark. You're confusing the heck out of me. I'm really
No,
calling
Peter, that's what happens with the
or
list.
lower on the list.
See,
Anything
Peter,
lower than
what
4.
happens with the list? This is what we have
So
to
we go down
understand.
the list, we go down the
You
list.
don't. What you do is you fill based on what you have. You take your available capacity and you apply it to youth sports. What's left after youth sports gets their fill gets then allocated to the groups that don't satisfy the residency requirements. That's the way this is written.
And we
There's
disagree.
no exclusivity.
You don't have to disagree.
Guys,
That's how it's written.
Just hang on a second.
It's
You
in
can't
bold.
have people speaking out of. Okay. Okay, we got it. So these 2 people have been waiting.
Watertown men's softball. I'm curious as to a time that we're there that you need the field now. Are we on the field now when you want it?
Yeah, so what happens is we don't have enough, right now,
What
we don't
time
have
is
enough
that? Out of
fields.
curiosity, what time are you trying to go to?
So
8,
when
9?
you guys come in, we said that the hours that really don't work for kids. So think of it this way, the kids that we have, the pre-K to K play Saturday mornings, Wednesday nights. Don't worry about them. From U9, which is 8-year-olds, to U18, then we have those spread out the week. Up until 9 o'clock, we've made an exception that we let the U14s play up until 9 o'clock. But in some instances, we have 9, 10, 11-year-olds playing at 8:45 because they don't have any other fields available. 10-year-olds playing at 8:45 because we don't have any other fields.
No.
Yeah, you don't get there until 7:30, so I'm just wondering, so there's a window there, out of curiosity how it,
Right.
we're in the way. You know what I mean? And most of our hours are in the summer, when all the things are completed. We start in May, and we come in after you guys leave.
Right. When the season, it's 2 10-week seasons. It's,
Right.
it's,
So I'm just saying that most of our hours in the summer, but we backed off, and that's all the priority list, and understandably, so I'm just trying to figure out how much more do you want to make it work for you?
right.
They don't want to go.
Okay, that's a good question. Let's hold that one with you.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Kenny said earlier is finding a way to maximize the field space that we actually have in Watertown. If you ask me if we've done that, absolutely not. I've lived on Mount Auburn Street in Watertown for the last 19 years of my life. I've lived in Watertown my entire life. Probably the second biggest playing surface I live right across the street from, which is Hosner Field, has never been used past 6 o'clock. So if you ask me, how many teams could fit on that field from 6 to 10 o'clock at night? Probably 5, 6, maybe 8. There's no fence there for baseball that's put up by hand, so it can be taken down by hand as well for soccer to be used for a multi-field. So the question is, are we maximizing the actual space that we have now? Absolutely not.
So,
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. I want to see people who haven't spoken.
Youth lacrosse does use the Hosmer Field after 6 o'clock. They're on it.
who is on it, please?
Youth lacrosse is on it.
Thank you. Did you want to say something, sir?
Yeah, I coach football and baseball at the high school. I'm also the phys ed teacher up there. So I coach in the fall and the spring. And Peter, I might be wrong on this. I think I'm trying to help you there.
Go for it, buddy.
Danger. I think other than track in the spring, I don't see much going on during the week on the grass field, I don't think. I think it's more people just want to use the turf. I think that's the big issue.
You know what, I don't want to always counterpoint, but if we all take that time tomorrow and look at the schedule, in the spring, okay, in the afternoons at 5:30, most of the time, it's either girls, youth lacrosse, or soccer has a couple of days. So they are scheduled. I don't know if they show up, but they are scheduled. So that's,
Okay. Yes.
Okay,
but thank you, I'm just trying to clarify.
Okay, that's a key point that I've heard in town from several coaches, and that is that people, when they are not going to use the fields, are not canceling. And that occurs also with lights on the field, that the lights are on for hours and there's nobody out there.
Yeah.
So that is absurd, and I don't know if that's a high school issue. I know that you've been caught in this, and that I don't think it's your fault. I'm going to stand up for you on this one, Peter. So I think
Somebody videotape this?
yes, I will. Okay, I will say it. I'm saying it publicly. You've got witness. But I think you need some kind of cancellation policy, because it's not fair if people are trying to book fields and people are just blanketly, as the gentleman over here, or somebody said, you know, requesting 36 games because they like this field the best. Sorry. You know, I might like to swim at the Mount Auburn pool, but, you know, I don't belong there. So I think we really have to tighten this down a little bit. And I want to make one comment here. And you all know that CPA was passed in Watertown. Well, that gives money for recreation fields and open space. I think you guys ought to get behind that we buy Walker Pond and create more recreation fields over there and use that money from CPA to fund bonds to get a walking path and more fields. You know, many people, I was for schools first, okay? I campaigned against the CPA because I believed in the schools need to be renovated first, but it is passed. So let's be proactive in how we use that money, and let's get together and lobby to get that Walker Pond done for additional fields, because I believe in giving kids great outdoor space. I played 3 sports myself, so please understand this is really, really important. Thank you for my little commercial, Tony.
You're welcome.
Something that I've heard from youth soccer and from Mr. Sullivan over here, which I thought was a really good idea, and I think there's some question about whether the policy is being followed, always, and whether discretion has come in at times to maybe bump 3, 4, 5, and 6 up at times. Maybe not on all fields, maybe just on turf, like you said. Obviously, there's only certain fields that you guys can play on because of what you said earlier about the outfield distance. So I liked what Mr. Sullivan said earlier about people getting together to schedule the practices, and I think that's something I've heard from others before, not just youth soccer. He was banging you on the shoulders when he said that. Is that because you've been?
I think we could all work together a little better.
We could work together a little better. So I think that what a good, and talk about data and talk about actually something empirical that we can look to. We're now about to, I know that Peter said that these aren't actually set in stone, these timelines, and I keep going back to them. But, I mean, we're in that range of when we should be talking about fall permits. I think it would be a good time to, start a process, even if it's just a one-time deal, just to see how it goes for a year to get the fall permits worked out with everybody kind of trying to work together in a different way. Or at least kind of in a more transparent way rather than just send it all to Peter and then see what gets spit out at the end. And I think part of that process is going to come back to the guy who's been quiet for a long time, but here, because he's the first one on the list. And it sounds like I don't know how I could say this, but you kind of slow things down sometimes. So I'd like to hear from that, from you a little bit, but I also think that I'd like to kind of maybe walk away from this meeting with something like that for my colleagues to consider.
Sure. Okay, right on the floor.
The dates. How do those work for you?
Okay, I guess to talk about the fall situation is probably the best right now. The way we do our scheduling is the previous fall season. Last fall, all of our sports went on. At the end of the fall was a sports meeting with all the coaches and the liaison, the AD who's in charge of that sport in the Middlesex League. I'm in charge of basketball, somebody else is in charge of soccer, whatever the case may be. At that time, you get recommendations from coaches on where you go with schedules, what changes could take place in a schedule. For example, I'll use basketball. We flip-flop back and forth where we've had boys and girls play in the same town, and sometimes we go with boys and girls playing in opposite towns, okay, if you can follow that. Like, we were doing varsity boys and girls double headers for a few years. And then we went back, we did that for a lot of years. Then we split it up because people didn't think it was fair and coaches wanted to change. So the varsity boys would play, say, in Stoneham, and the varsity girls played in Watertown, and next time around they'd flip-flop. But that's a big change in terms of facilities. Those type of discussions come up, I'm just bringing general talk, those discussions come up at a postseason sports meeting. Then what happens is from that dialogue it goes to a league scheduler. The league scheduler then takes that information and creates schedules for the Middlesex League. All right?
For the next fall, for next September?
Yeah, for next September. I'm trying to tell you, I'm leading to where the process is. So we meet monthly as ADs, and when all of that information was given to the league scheduler, he looked at for schedules for next year. Say a soccer schedule in the fall. All of our fall schedules come in together.
Let's talk about fall for now.
Right. We look at religious dates, all kinds of things, Columbus Day, all the different things that could come up as conflict dates, if you will, during that fall. They go on the schedule. They come before the league meeting as ADs, and probably the next month after he passes them out, so people have the dialogue to go over them and bring them back to their coaches. And then what happens is we approve them from that point on. We're at the process right now where our schedules were approved. All the ADs right now are inputting all of the fall schedules into the computer, and we exchange schedules at our next meeting in June. So that's when we exchange schedules, and what we do with that exchange of schedules is we find out all of the conflicts or things that come up. So I will not have fully right schedules, if you will, until June 13th. And then from that point, that's when I'll be able to give an initial thing to Peter on that.
Is that a safe date for most years, June 13th?
Well, it's pretty, we meet the second Tuesday in June, and that's pretty safe when that fall schedule comes out, is that second week in June. Okay, and then, like I said, we exchange things. The toughest thing for me is as soon as I send things off and they get put into a schedule, the worst thing for me is schedules that take place after that, because that's when things, we do our schedule, we send it off, all right? Peter's booking it in, I'm booking in buses, we're booking everything, and then all of a sudden we get, well, this came up as a conflict, we have to change this. When you do that, things break down. I'm just telling you, from years of doing this, all of a sudden now we're trying to change buses here and things, and we run into conflicts with teams being in Watertown and the same team we're supposed to play is in Stone. I mean, things come up like that with a multitude of schedules that we do. So that's the fall.
Well, just looking at that, it seems like, I know you said, Peter, that permits are issued beginning on March 6th. That's a long ways till June 13th.
Okay, so again, Mike additionally has non-league games. So what I do, I've already asked for the fall permit. We've been doing this 5 years now with the turf, and a lot of people don't understand this. So generally, I'll begin, even before I get his, I'm generally going to put a template in. Monday through Friday, 2:30 to 8, okay? And then just put that across the board just to get going.
And that satisfies usually when he comes out with his
No,
schedule?
not really. He'll like Friday night with each season, like Friday night football. Then he'll tell me we get 5, 6 football games. The other thing that's the issue is with the tournament play, which a lot of the coaches like, but then you really don't know, so I have to save those. But he'll know if it's 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And then he has, I'm sorry?
8. I just want to say that 8 o'clock is not sufficient time. I practice, I'd say 80% of my practices ended after 9:30.
And who are you, sir?
I'm the boys soccer coach.
Well, Frank, I'm just going to post what we used last year. I mean, it's all...
High school boys soccer coach. That's...
what I'm trying to say, Frank, is before, when I'm trying to give the counselors, I'm putting in a 10-point because at the least, we're going away. Now, depends if you have an away game. I mean, there's a different dynamic on that. But a lot of people, like, for instance, I'll get permit requests, and I'm trying to keep it calm here. I want the turf field at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. And then they get upset at me when I don't give them the turf field on 6 o'clock on Wednesday. And youth organization is almost never going to get a turf field at 6 o'clock on Wednesday. Unless, like today, there was a gap and we snuck youth lacrosse in. Mike called me, did a great job, and we had 5:30 to 8. Okay, so that's the thing. So I try to start doing it. So we have historical piece to get them going. You don't, believe it or not, we don't have a lot of problem with that. The problem also, like Mike said, we sometimes have makeup games and so on and so forth. So I'll put in for the fall till 8 o'clock, sometimes 9, whatever it is, and then we'll look at, and then Saturday mornings we go 8 to 11, give or take, but sometimes if it's an SAT. So I'll have that generally. And then when he finally gives it to me, then we make that adjustment. So that's why everybody else has to make, because the last thing that happens, if all of a sudden I give it to youth football or youth soccer, which they're in season, and I'll say, okay, youth soccer, you could have the field 8 to 10 based on my gauge, and all of a sudden Mike will say, well, we got a soccer game till 9, then everybody gets mad at me and say, Pete, why are you taking field away? So that's why we wait. That's why we wait. So it's a catch-22 with me.
Another thing, could we tell all the youth leagues and anybody who wants a permit, get their stuff in like it says here, but then would we be able to, how long does it take after he gets his to you on June 13th, given that, understanding that, yeah, sometimes things come up and you have to reschedule something, how long does it take for you then to, after June 13th to process on top of what he's giving you, all these guys?
Pretty easy. It's pretty easy. Because youth soccer does a very good job getting in early, and youth football has already sent theirs in already. So those are
for the fall, by the end of June, we could have our permits Because that doesn't sound like what we usually what usually happens.
We try to send it out as soon as we can. Again, I don't send permits out until I'm comfortable, and me and Mike are comfortable that that's firmed up. Because once I send it out, it's hard to pull it back.
So it isn't firm on June, I mean, apart from the emergencies, which you won't know till the week before.
Right. And, well, the other piece I haven't talked about is there's a lot of scheduling we do amongst ourselves, okay? Because we have a lot of users. I made up a sheet here. I don't know if you want me to pass it out at all in terms of the use at Victory Field for us. And basically, in the fall, we have football, field hockey, boys and girls soccer using the turf. Okay, so I get those schedules, we put them in, but then we have internal problems. What happens if a field hockey game gets scheduled the same day as a boys soccer game, say? So we're trying to work in a football practice in the afternoon, a boys soccer game, and a field hockey game. That potentially can happen, and that's when we start bumping till 9 o'clock. But that's an internal meeting we do with all the scheduling. The other part of this is field hockey has a varsity and JV. Right now, we don't have JV. Our numbers have been down a little bit in terms of, say, JV field hockey, but the template, hopefully our numbers are coming back here, is a varsity. They play a JV and varsity game back to back because they are limited in officials, so one set of officials can do both games. So we play a varsity game at 4 o'clock, okay, and then the JV game is played after that, which say could be 5:30. And what we've been doing, because we're trying to maximize the turf time for our varsities, that JV game bounces to the oval and becomes a 5:15 or 5:30 start for a JV game, and we're playing that. Soccer's another dynamic like that. Teams travel varsity and JV together. All right, so a bus will say coming from Stony and brings a varsity JV team over, and normally what will happen in most school systems, because of the fields, they will play at the same time. Sometimes we can do that. Where we run into the problems is with our scheduling, a lot of our games get kicked tonight. So we could have a 7 o'clock soccer game. Now the problem I have is there's no lights on Victory Field, so we have to make that game, say, 5:30. With daylight savings time, that comes into a problem. You know what I mean? But that's another time where we're using the oval from 5:30 to, say, 7 o'clock to get a JV game. And it's actually an inconvenience to the other town, because it's much better if you can play them at the same time. Because think of the cost from the other end of things and time commitment. They're sending a team over with 2 teams. If you're playing, say, a 5:30 game, they're probably leaving at the latest 4:30. They bring 2 teams over. The first team plays at 4:30. The second team plays at 7. The game's over at 9. They're getting back at, say, 9:30, 10 o'clock. All right, because of that, the way we structure it, we're adding to their bus bills, and we're inconveniencing athletes in terms of being out from leaving at, say, 4:30 and not getting home till 10 o'clock at night.
Right, and,
so, I mean,
and you haven't even dealt with the issue of later start times.
No, and that's down on my list here for coming in the 18-19 year, which is going to be a huge impact in this room, that if we're out of school later, and now everybody's starting later, and it's going to push us later. So that's coming.
So just to follow up, this last little summary of my comments was, I'd like to propose that we look at the June 13th neighborhood, give or take a week or I don't know what, give Peter some time, and then come together as a group and look at what comes out of that, and just say, all right, here's the policy. Everybody's got their stuff in. It's July 1st. We don't have to start playing on these fields until September 1st. Maybe. I don't know, maybe sooner than that. Let's see if the policy stands.
Right. Bravo.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
You're asking for what are you asking for? A recommendation?
I don't know how we do it. Parliament.
Who are you asking that gets together?
I guess I'm talking to everybody in the room and to you guys, committee members, and
who are you asking gets together?
The people who've applied for the permits.
I have a comment relevant to that. I think you're also getting at this. It sounds like it's not really helpful to say we'll issue permits starting in March, when really you don't have all the facts until June.
Councilman, you want me to just look at this document?
I think that maybe, I mean, I know he said that it's not official, it's like
Permits
beginning and accepted.
will be beginning issued in March.
Why not instead say all permits will be issued by June 30th?
I'm keeping it very vague, because I don't know.
Yeah, I think that vagueness is confusing. Yes.
It says permits will be issued beginning March 6th.
I think that's a good point.
And I could also ask,
Which
is the
yours
permit,
or mine?
Yours. Sorry to interrupt you.
it's okay. You know, when the permit, it's beginning, so as soon as I hear from the main person, we start the process of, because again, youth soccer has already done well. I already have youth football scheduled, and those are going to be the
Well,
priority.
if you say all permits will be issued by June 30th, doesn't mean you couldn't send one out May 1st.
It's a semantic, it's
No,
semantics.
I think it's important. See, there was.
I have two questions, and then I'd like to speak. First, you.
Well, I'm president of Watertown Youth Baseball, softball, and Challenger League. Obviously, we have a lot of diamonds, small diamonds in the league that nobody else can use.
Right.
So that's part of the reason why we have almost 4,000 hours. We also have older kids that need the bigger fields, like Moxley, like Vic.
Right.
Which, you know, to our own problems, we don't get the schedules because we don't make those schedules. We're a travel league. I know soccer is also a travel league, but they have a little bigger organization that they have to deal with. Getting the permits to Peter by the 13th is out of my control. So what I have to do is say, okay, Peter, this is what I want. And it's the wrong process. You know what I mean? And Peter knows, like, what do you want? Well, I need Monday through Friday, you know, 6 to 10. Because I don't know what I need. And then he just, you know.
You don't know what you need because.
I don't, because the schedule's not made.
But you're in the spring though, right? You're not.
I'm in the spring. I'm in the spring, but I'm just making a point where I won't have the schedule, but we do play fall. We have fall baseball, which we get thrown off of Moxley on August 1st because of football. So we don't really have a field unless football is moved.
But when you said your you don't.
So I'm going back to spring. I apologize.
You don't make a schedule.
We don't. We do for the Little League, but not for the Babe Ruth.
I see.
So our Babe Ruth is a travel league.
I see.
Could you explain what that means for those of us that are a bit ignorant? I know you go
Gotta
around
work
to
with other
different-
towns.
Babe Ruth is a travel league. That means we travel to other towns.
I understand that part, but are you saying you and the other towns do not make a schedule of
We-
where you're going to play? That sounds a little fakakta.
So there's a board that makes the schedules. There's a team that makes the schedules. I am not part of that board. So the league makes the schedules, and we are part of the league, but we're not part of the board that makes the schedules.
So again, the question would be, when do
Sure.
they make their schedule that
Obviously
then
not
feeds
in
into-
time for Get to Peter. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's what you're saying, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
wasn't getting that.
Okay, let's talk
Hang on
about
a
the
second,
fall.
please. Just a second. Go ahead, and then go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just, you said I know you have fall ball, so.
And we do have fall ball.
I'm talking about kind of a pilot thing that we do this year in Watertown. Everybody get together, let's look at the fall season and see how it goes. Would a June 30th date for your fall ball schedule work?
And again, I think it's a great idea to get all the leagues together in a room to discuss it. You know what I mean? Yes, I can come up with dates.
Do you know there's over 100 people that have been permitted last year, right? So you're not getting all 100 different organizations that want a permit.
Well, why don't we take the big year?
Right, the 83%.
The 83%, right?
Okay, can I?
So I'm just throwing this out there. I mean, you could take them, but I mean, you could be excluding a lot of Watertown-based organizations like Bright Horizons, the Watertown Police and Fire, the Association of Blind Citizens. I mean, there are a lot of groups that use the fields besides the ones that are largely in the room. So I mean,
That's a
just
good
saying
point.
to exclude them and limit their time, they probably want to stay. So I think the
Well, we have a-
suggestion of getting everyone in a room together.
We have a prioritization
bigger
system,
room. Right.
so I think maybe it's a good point, we should focus on the top three.
Okay, we're going to hold that. Let's keep this over here, the schedule, Councilor. Duska's suggestion sounds like a good one. I want to just make one thought here on this. The priority list, no one seems to be questioning. It's the implementation of the priority list that people are questioning, which is what Councilor Woodland said earlier. I'd like to make a suggestion, though, that the priority list be changed. And I'd like to eliminate anybody from 7, 8, and 9. I'd like them not to be using our fields from 7, 8, and 9. And I would like to, if we did that, if you eliminated those 3 priorities, organizations, groups that are not Watertown based, and you just got rid of them, wouldn't that open up a number of, it would push down the other priorities to use more fields, and that would open up more fields. Am I correct in that thinking? Just a second.
So, can I just...
I'm asking a question. Am I correct in thinking that if you eliminate...
I don't think so.
No.
Why?
Because what you're saying is if you take out groups and exclude them, you're going to free up capacity.
That's what I said.
That's not the case. The problem that we have is that we have to go back to Justin's point earlier on, is look, first and foremost what you have to do is you have to look at the available capacity. Because you may well have capacity for all of the groups if you were to schedule it the right way, and the right way to do it, as Aaron has discussed, is everybody takes their permits, everybody submits their permits. Here's, like Tony, what's likely going to happen is 7, 8, 9 aren't going to end up getting any time, right? So it'll end up having, just by natural order here, you're going to have groups that will probably end up not having any time. I'm with you to take it out, but it isn't necessarily going to free up capacity by taking out those groups. What we have to do is take an audit of the available capacity that we have, figure out how we use the available capacity, carve out the time for the schools, which we do pretty much right out of the gate, 2 to 8, and then you know what? Everybody here has to adjust. If in your schedule, whether it be baseball, whether it be lacrosse, whether it be soccer, you have to adjust to accommodate the school if something comes out of the ordinary. The issue here isn't the 2 to 8 problem. The issue is from 8 and on, and kind of figuring out where we put all of these youth sports. And what happens is, the question was asked by Tom earlier on about the groups getting together. We have gotten together. We've sat down in the lower room downstairs and we've discussed the process. What happens is, all of these permit requests go to the recreation department, and it comes out at best in August.
That's not true.
It absolutely is true, Peter. And so at best in August, where you have anything that's firm that you can base a season on, and there's draft across it, whatever. What we need to do is have the groups, the key stakeholders that are involved in the process, take their permits for the fall, submit them to Peter, and we all sit down and we have the conversation and go, hey, baseball, what's going to happen here? What do you guys need? How many teams do you have? And because the subtleties of what we're doing here has been completely lost. We're applying this nonsensical, here's the number of hours, here's a percentage of the number of hours, the number is 22%, the number is 19%. It takes no account of the kids that are serviced, it takes no account of the hours per customer, or per participant, it takes no account of how we're doing the distribution of these valuable resources in the time for Watertown kids.
Okay. Okay.
Frank, did you have I'm all set. It was addressed. Thank you.
Cool. May I?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I'll be super quick. The baseball guys, you guys have a good point about appropriateness of a field. Like, there's only a field that works for you.
Sure.
I think there's one. There's one field that works for you. So that's super important when we look at weighting the hours and how things are applied. So that kind of goes back to how we look at this rubric. And I'll say, you know, that for soccer, a game that's played on the ground, for especially older kids to play on a field that isn't very smooth, really changes the game. So I just am putting that out there, and an appropriateness of a field. It certainly makes the case for more turf in town, but that's a field appropriateness of the sport to the field is a big thing. I also want to raise the point that the exclusive full facility use for one team for practice seems like a big opportunity to solve some of this problem. We see that in the fall with some high school teams, not all of them, but some of them. They get the whole facility for 18 kids, while there's a practice facility in the baseball area that could be permitted for additional groups. Seems like that would be a really interesting thing to explore. And that brings me to my last point, which is like, you know, we're all really concerned, we're fighting for what we love, but I want to encourage everybody to realize that we're role models for kids. And we need to do that. And I've been on the field where I've been barked at by other coaches, by people from the recreation department, and that doesn't feel good, and it's a really harsh thing. I've actually broken up shouting matches between parents and rangers because of the energy between people. And I'm not saying that, I'm not putting that blame on any one person, any one sport, any one party. I'm calling us all higher to be like, we could do better, and the first thing we should do is be good role models for kids. And we could do it in this room, we could do it on the fields. So I just want to say that let's try that even while we work this out. If there's an overlap in time, if there's like somebody who's there, if there's a ranger who doesn't like a kid sitting on the turf, we could probably approach those things with more politeness and more professionalism. That's all.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I think Aaron's suggestion is really good. The one thing I heard here was a lot of feeling that, your point, that the time you want to use the baseball field will often not interfere, particularly if you don't have to go late on soccer because you've been able to do the stuff earlier. So it just sounds as though there's a lot of maybe it's wrong, but there's a lot of feeling that there is actually room to work this out, and that it is incredibly complicated because it matters when it is and what field it is. So I just want to say, I think your idea of getting together with the main players and thrashing this out is a really good one, because that'll tell you where the conflicts are and give you a sense of actually what your needs are. So congratulations.
I'm just going off of your, thank you, by the way, your proposal. So that pretty much would wipe us out altogether, because it sounds like we're continuously being labeled an outside organization.
No,
Well, we're not.
town-based organization?
Right.
Well, then I didn't say you.
Yeah, you're not in the,
7, 8, 9.
You're not in 7, 8, and 9.
You're 4, 5, and 6. You're 4, 5, and 6.
Unless you want to.
No, and I just to clarify, by the way, my wife teaches at Watertown High School, so my taxes actually still come through the city and the town.
Okay.
So that was, didn't like that call.
Yes.
I just want to say, I know a lot of people talk about like soccer having a lot of kids. My son plays lacrosse. There's not a lot of kids in the program, but just because of that, that doesn't mean they shouldn't have priority during their season.
I understand.
So I just don't want that to get lost in the whole, because everybody's saying, oh, there's 800 kids, there's this many kids, but he deserves just as much time on the field as anybody else.
Sorry, I just have to get the kids to bed, but in general, in my experience, when there is transparency, there is trust. There is clearly a lack of trust in this room. So I think whatever solution we put forward, however many people are involved, whoever's not involved is still going to have that lack of trust because of lack of transparency. So while I throw my children in bed, I just leave you with that, so that whatever we do is somehow made public to everyone, so that there aren't any behind-the-scenes black box algorithms that are going into any of this, that it's all visible to everyone that's involved. Otherwise, we're going to have another meeting like this. So that's it.
Bravo.
I would just like to say I spent a lot of time 2 years ago talking to the Natural Turf Association and going out and visiting all the different schools, and I think we could do a lot better in terms of the care and nurturing of our fields. And I don't know whether this committee can address that, but we don't aerate them. We give them wiffle cuts every Monday morning, so they're rock hard. They need to be overseeded, and we're going to be addressing some of these issues, obviously, at Victory. But, I've walked these fields with several different people in town that have played a lot of sports. We could do a lot better. I'm not sure how we go about doing that, but I come from a family that plays soccer. And for those of you that don't know me, my family is Dutch, so soccer is our sport. And everybody would rather play on a real beautiful natural field than an artificial turf field. But I think we need to address that.
I did want to say that I think Mr. his name from the Parks, Dorico does a pretty good job of.
It's an outside vendor that comes into mow.
That's I know, but he does a pretty good job of separating out fields and giving fields a rest, and they're not being played on for one season. And so I'm not an expert in it too, but I think the guy has done his pretty good role in it.
We're always complaining that the grass is too long. So, I don't know where the short stuff is coming from. You call Peter all the
Yes.
time.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask of the schools again about the question about, I've heard this before, when you have a permit on Victory Field turf, for example, and you have, like, if you have one team practicing there, is that something we can talk about? Because it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, we've taken the stand that when the schools are on, the schools are using the field. And when...
Why?
Why? Why? Because a lot of reasons why. First of all, people walk on the field all the time. And our coaches shouldn't have to address, I don't think, have to address people that are on there when we're having practice. And that's one reason.
On the playing surface?
They're on the...
Yes.
Right. Right, that's one thing. They just show up and start practicing and playing and things like that. So that's an issue. I think we're worried a little bit about liability and things like that with baseball on the field and balls flying and stuff like that, or lacrosse balls flying. And I think we're just worried about who's supervising at times too. So we've every place I've been, okay, and in the league, I mean, I had a little thing going here and talking about this, but in most of the schools in our league, they have fields at the high school, and they pretty much are school fields and town fields. Okay, we're one of the few schools. I think if you look at all 11 schools in the league, everybody has their schools right at the high school. We have to travel a little bit. It's an inconvenience, but it's pretty much.
Victory Field is your school.
Pardon me? Yeah, that's a point. I want people to understand that Victory Field is our complex. Okay, but some people don't see it that way sometimes, I think. I think they see it as more of a recreational area. But to us, we don't have any place. You go down to the building. What's down at the building? There's nothing.
Well,
So
we actually have kind of, we've gone both ways on that, because we've created that facility with a real community outreach program. There was a whole committee in charge of making sure that everybody felt like it was their area. It's our town pride and joy, that athletic facility. So we've kind of created that problem ourselves. But I see your point. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't have people roaming on in the middle of your practice.
Isn't that what a park ranger could do? I mean, isn't there staff that's the answer I've gotten.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Like, we're putting a policy in front of just kind of common sense, reasonable things that probably could be taken care of in real time by some of your great staff.
Yes.
Deep breath. Unfortunately, this spring and periodically, we haven't been able to hire park rangers. And thanks to the town council, is one of the reasons why we're looking for a full-time person, not to be a park ranger, but to free up some things. Normally, the park ranger is there to monitor the situation. Sometimes we haven't been there. That being said, I think everybody in this room knows that when the high school has the field, no one else should be on the field. And I think, and I don't want to...
Not everyone agrees with that, though. I mean, that's...
Okay. Well, again, that's in the policy, and that's the directive of the user of the field. They have the permit. It's just like if I ever get married a third time and I get a dance hall, I don't want people showing up on table 5 and 6. It's a very simple thing. Well, yeah, I know. I was just trying to have some levity. But the high school has the field, and they have privilege.
So why are you standing up for the high school right now instead of a bunch of people in the community who have a different...
No.
Because I want to say this. I don't think this committee this committee is not going to take up the issue of whether the high school, the Victory Field is a high school field. It is the town, it is the Watertown Public Schools field. That is where they practice, where they perform, where they have their leagues. We're not going to try to change that athletic policy right here. That's our town. We just don't happen to have a high school field next door to the school. That's their field. They walk to it. That's where they play, and we're not going to change that. We'll work around the other things, but we're not going to change that. Yes. I'm sorry, Council.
I just want to.
Council President Seders.
We can have 5 of these types of meetings and have the same thing coming around. Not only do we, Aaron's suggestion of trying to get together more to talk this through, we have a capacity issue, and it's been addressed. Someone said about the CPA. we don't have appropriate fields that other people can play adult baseball. We are just now possibly getting lights fixed at Philipello Park. They may be done by September. I don't think the committee can make all these decisions because there are a lot of different issues. I do think we have to have a discussion as a town, though, about capacity, about fields. How can we approach creating new spaces, i.e. potential CPA money, potential looking at things that we haven't looked at before. I think that's a conversation that we should be having to address some of these needs. Because we can have these kinds of meetings, we're not gonna solve the problem with one victory field. It's not enough capacity.
Okay. Yes?
One more question, Tony. Wouldn't there be an opportunity to have 2 high school teams on the field at the same time? Because you don't always have to use the entire field for practice. You can do drills, you can do scrimmages, so that if there were certain days that you were devoting to those type of things, it might free up some extra time on the, on the artificial turf field. I'm just asking.
Sure, it's a good question. We have the one piece on the scheduling thing I didn't throw in is we have, after we get the schedule, we sit down with all the varsity coaches, Frank Caccia, Mike Collins, John Kakachi, the football coach, Eileen Donahue. That meeting is scheduled right after I get my schedule, and we work out, we meet twice, it probably takes 10 hours to do this. We go through every single day and every single hour in terms of who's on the field, who's in this block, we have a game this day, how do we work this out? So we have that meeting about putting 10 hours to try to, we share the field ourselves. Quite a bit with things.
I didn't know.
And
are you going to hand out your?
I don't know if you would like it.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
Well, sure.
Can you finish up your
Sure. All right. The point I'm making is I just have a sample thing. I took October 6th. We had varsity football practice on 3 to 5:15. We happened to have a freshman football game that day. Hey, leave me alone. I'm not that good. We have a freshman football game at 6, so they come on at 5:15 for a 6 o'clock game. Boys and girls soccer comes on and practices 7 to 9. That's the night we go till 9 o'clock. We're lucky that day that field hockey is in another town. If they happen to be either not practicing or not playing away, we would have them in the mix there. So just so you see, on a particular day, there's 4 teams. We sit down, it's probably going to be right after I get this schedule with the 4 coaches, and we go through every single day trying to work it out. So we're sharing, and you want to know my most frustrating days with coaches, and if they were all here, they would tell you that, is when they're on the field, and we've got 60 football players coming on, and soccer players coming on, and we're moving equipment off, and everybody wants to get their practice in. So that's the complexities we have on our end, trying to even schedule within the time. So normally with Peter, we try to blanket in that, say, 2:30 or 3 o'clock to 8, but then we get into all of this individual stuff of, look, we got to go till 9 on this day because we have game days and things like that. So there's a lot of pieces to it, too. I just want to say that.
Spring probably offers less opportunity for
All right.
sharing, too.
Yes.
Sports.
Yes. Councilor Detoli
I just wanted to ask 2 quick policy questions. The first being, let's say, looking at the priority use of fields, I'm 6, 7, whatever, I put in my permit on the date, I get it, and then later on, after I'm issued a permit, somebody up higher on the chain requests.
We bump them.
You bump them. Second question, because I was at a meeting that the school committee was looking at athletic fields, and I did hear to that point about the athletic fields being used. The only coach I think who sort of would like to use the oval is Coach Kakachi for football, but there is a policy somewhere that says that football does not use the grass and the turf. Where is that policy?
Well, it's been determined that the damage football does to a field, okay, it tears it up pretty good. So you have to be redoing a field every year. And that's why the football field is the only field in town, per se. If he would take the oval to get out of this mess, to get out, yeah, you heard him at that meeting, to get out of the scheduling thing, if he didn't have to share the field, I'd go off. Give me the oval 5 days a week, and I'll play my games on Friday night, even if I'm playing on turf and I'll practice on grass. Okay, he'd take that, not to get into this whole thing of this one's on, this was on. Okay, so I don't know what the policy is, but I think it's been deemed because of the damage to the field.
I'm just curious who deemed that?
Who deemed it? Well, can I just first, so first of all, we, you know, the DPW as well as recreation, and for the people who use the soccer. So again, respectfully, I disagree. Not only does football, you know, don't use that field once in a while, they go on it, but JV soccer uses the field, okay? Girls soccer uses the field hockey, JV girls. I think, council, where I get frustrated is people say the fields aren't being used. Well, in the fall, that's who uses that field. And in the spring, the track uses the field. So the field, that oval is used.
It's still being used.
It's still being used. Now, there are some days you could see it's open, but it's getting scheduled. And Frank, I don't know, I know you can kind of, you want to chip in, sometimes your JV soccer plays there, correct?
That's where they play their home games.
Right, but what I'm saying, in all fairness, Council totally said football. And again, that's kind of me and Bob, well, at the time Bob wasn't here. When we did phase 1 of Victory, one of the pushes was that we were going to have to spend $80,000 in soccer. And if we really want the Sockers to be on that field, it wouldn't be fair if all of a sudden the field wasn't. I mean, right now it's kind of a bumpy road. It's not the greatest.
Okay, Councilor.
So just as specifically as it relates to the two, I guess, recommendations that the committee is considering, first in eliminating 7, 8, and 9 from the policy, the committee hasn't considered the 100+ permitted organizations that come to our fields. So to make that recommendation tonight is very inappropriate without considering the impact of those organizations or notifying them to be heard tonight. For example, a good one that comes to mind is Relay for Life, or Boston Sports Club that has 1,500 Watertown residents in their programs. So to make that judgment without considering those organizations is premature, not appropriate for this evening. And as it relates to the other recommendation to get everyone together and kind of hash out some of these problems, the rec department holds community meetings. Was it once a week or once a
month?
Once a month on a Tuesday that no one ever attends, and that could be a great opportunity for folks to come and talk about these issues. Not only that, it's the correct forum to meet and talk about those issues, but to get everyone together. And again, I would want to include smaller stakeholders because that would make sense because they've just as much invested in the fields. I think it's impractical, unworkable, and that's why we have a recreation department, is to do that job. So I think we're negating that. So I just have a couple problems with the recommendations that are being considered.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess maybe there's a couple of things. We did attend the meetings. The meetings have an agenda. They don't have any minutes and they don't have any feedback, and there's no action items. So I think that's what happens when people attend the forum. And number two, the pushback on bringing transparency to the process is unbelievable. We quote the 83% as the 83% number, and this is what the 83% is. Now we want to take this 83%, we could do a carve-out. We could say, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll take X period of time, we'll set aside 10%. But if you're going to say the 83% is the number that we're going to look at, there's absolutely no reason why those groups shouldn't be represented after they submit the permits and we sit down and we go through the process. Will there be some fringe opportunities? Absolutely. Relay for Life, I think we can figure out what Relay for Life is. So when you sit down and you look at the list, I think what you could figure out pretty quickly of those ones that, quote unquote, are underrepresented. Boston Ski and Sports, it's interesting you mentioned Boston Ski and Sports, a for-profit organization. It doesn't matter where their participants live. You could go to
their residents.
But it doesn't matter where they go to if they join a for-profit organization. Yeah, that's what you're missing. It's like if I join Oakley Country Club and I walk into Oakley Country Club, I can say, hey, you know, I'm a resident here, I should play for free. That's you're pretty much associating Boston Ski and Sports with their membership where they're resident. It doesn't matter. It's a for-profit organization. They should be in the bottom of the list.
Just if I could, Tony, if I could respond, because this percentage thing keeps getting brought up, and the percentage was explicitly to show that there was the previous notion that we are not dedicating enough field time to our youth sports. We dedicate 83% of them. It's not like some hard and fast number that we're using to determine anything. It's just an objective data point that that I think demonstrates that we are showing that we are demonstrating and we are putting towards our fields.
Let him finish, please.
Thank you. And further, the numbers we pointed out for you guys is to show that you're right. Youth soccer does, you have more needs. You want to get better field time and do all these things, which we all agree with. But you're getting a fair shake right now, based on the current policies and what's happening. You're getting 2,840 hours. So you keep going back like these. I'm trying to point out these numbers for something else. I'm showing you, based on objective data, that you guys are getting the fields a lot, and that can't be disputed. And
No one's disputing it.
you're acting like I'm pointing it out to say that that's our standard or something. It's not. It's just to show where we are today.
All right, I have to respond.
Go ahead.
So I got to respond. Number one, the hours are incorrect. So you can continue to quote that they're 83 hours. What happens is, as you use ranges, there's unusable time within the hours. When you see the permits, you'll see it. Number two, turf. We get turf 7 hours a week. So our problem isn't turf. It's never been the turf. I could give what about the turf. It's about when we are trying to allocate time to kids on fields and we have multiple kids on fields. So if you turned around to me and you said, here's what you could do. We could fix this problem tonight. If you gave me a section, we sit down, we have the conversation that Mr. Sullivan said, as a group, that nobody wants to have the transparent conversation. And we sit down and we say, as a group, I don't know why this is so stunning to people. As a group, we sit down and we say, here's our permits, here's what we need, here are our teams, here are the hours per team, here are the games that we're going to play. Let's do the math and figure out the math. Where we have to qualify that back is when we have to adjust for the schools. No one is disputing that. But the pushback on not having an open dialogue and then bring it back to a forum that frankly nobody participates in, there's a reason nobody participates in it.
Okay.
And so we can't use that as the forum. We have to do something, but hold on a second, Tony. We have to do something that's specific to this problem and not try and shoehorn it into something that's existed in the past that hasn't worked in the past.
Let's be careful about what we say about what hasn't worked. There's no other department that I know who has a monthly meeting, whether you want to go to it or not. And I've seen the agenda, and I've gone to them. So just let's be at least a little bit generous here about what has happened with the rec department. They have instituted something that I have not seen. I got you. I got it.
Okay, I just told my hand
have instituted something that is usually hasn't been done before. At least wasn't been done before before Peter got here. So whether it is the best platform, I'm not sure. But it does have an agenda. People go to it. Some people go to it. A lot of them go to it. But he continues to have it. And so let's just put that in perspective. Now, you have not spoken, and your hand is up. Can you just tell me what
I'm with Boston Ski and Sports Club, and I think you'd have a hard time finding any hours that we have are within the time frame that you're looking to take. I'm waiting until they're all gone from the school, from there, from the Reds, from wherever, and I take whatever's left over. Most of it is from when the school year's over until the end of August. Then there's other times on the weekends that there's a fringe hour and a half here where no one's using. Those are where all of our hours are. And that's all the extra revenue that we're giving the town.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
I just want to, I'm sorry, what organization are you from?
Boston Ski and Sports Club.
Okay, I would want to say one
Who is in
thing
Watertown?
about Victory Field, and that is also a park and a free space for kids to play. And when I've been there and I see 4 different groups of kids playing, whether they're one group's throwing a football, one group is doing a soccer, somebody's flying a kite, and I see them kicked off the field for the Boston Ski and Sports Club, that gets my goat. Sorry. I pay taxes for the kids and the people in my community, and I think the Boston Ski and Sports Club should rent a daily field. I agree totally with Mark on this issue. It doesn't belong at the limited tiny space that we have in this town.
I can respond from a community member standpoint to help that. I've never had that experience with Boston Ski and Sports. I've actually been down there in that exact position that you're suggesting. And an organization like Boston Ski and Sports and many organizations will say, hey, we actually have a permit. Do you guys mind going over there? And we'll do it. Out of the spirit of sharing a facility,
Right.
which is super cool. The time when that doesn't happen is frankly when the high school has the field. And there's an opportunity for that.
Council, this is the last comment, because I just
We're going to close the public forum. in a
I just
second.
want to first thank the Watertown Reds and Watertown Softball and Mark Roberts for coming and everybody else. We want to work this out, so whatever the recommendations were, I think council would have been straight on. What I do want to say with Mark Roberts, and I wish people would come in our office with the video. And Mark asked, we go back and forth, and I said, no, We gotta take care of the high school, we gotta take care, and Mark wrote that in the letter. His business is in Watertown. And the other thing, the last thing I'm gonna say is, I keep on hearing, let's service the youth of Watertown. This has been Tommy Sullivan, Director of Recreation, that was his mission for 40 years. I started as a camp counselor, and I have my faults, but I started as a camp counselor in 1976. Nobody's gonna tell me that my best interests are not in the kids of Watertown. But, look at the guys around here. Gio. These guys, when I coached, I love to see these. Smitty, coach. I remember Coach Chiodo doing sprints, who's a great track fastest.
Peter,
what I'm trying to say is, let's take care of the part of it. Everybody's talking about, let's just worry about the kids. We got to worry about the kids, but let's worry about the adults.
Okay,
the
that's
kids
your
who are
point.
the adults. That's the point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Last comment, then we're gonna.
Much like the Red, Watertown softball has one field that can hold us. So Filipello is the only field that we can play at. There isn't another field that can hold us. And I would say probably 60 to 70% of the league are Watertown guys. And the others are guys that just moved out of Watertown because they can't afford it. And I'm still a Watertown resident.
I have one
Played
quick
in the
thing.
league for 26 years.
Go ahead.
So I deal with a lot of other towns, so there's a lot of the same issue happens everywhere. And one thing you talked about was that youth groups take as much space as they can possibly get, and sometimes they don't use it. And that's where the communication needs to happen between lacrosse, soccer, football, whatever, to share their space and make sure that it does get used. Because like he said, his field is empty all the time. He looks across the street and no one's using it. Somehow, everyone wants as much space as they can get, and they need to just figure out a way to share it from those top 3-4 people.
That's it. Is there any other comments before we close off the public forum and the committee is going to chat for a little while? You're welcome to, don't go away. I just want to make sure that everybody's got their say. Did Councilor Canellis come in?
Yes.
Oh, she's not here. I just wanted to acknowledge her. Okay, sir. Okay, so the committee now has to think about what's the best next steps. And you had and let me just say, it may be an inappropriate suggestion. It was a suggestion. I wanted to see whether the 7, 8, 9 elimination would produce some more fields space, and it appears that that's not possible. It doesn't open up space. I kind of find that hard to believe, but if eliminating the use of
eliminates, it will eliminate leagues altogether. From baseball league and softball, eliminating those, we're very limited what fields we can use. So to get a few more hours of Philadelphia field for soccer will eliminate entire men's leagues.
No, I'm not talking about the Watertown baseball based organizations. I was talking about 7, 8, 9. But we're not going to entertain that suggestion. The suggestion was to see whether that would produce. I look at all these organizations here on the list and how many hours they get. It seemed to me that it might have opened up some space, but I'm not going to argue it. So let's talk about the.
I guess I have an idea, and I kind of threw it out in my typical disorganized way. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, guys, on how we might kind of structure that in a parliamentary way. Do you want to do this as another committee meeting where we ask Peter to come with the information that's come from all the permit holders, or is that's not really efficient? You've done some kind of like I think of the senior center meeting that we did a while back, where it wasn't necessarily this kind of format, but it was more of a collaborative thing, where we could bring in these 83% of the groups or some subset of this list to look at the permits after the school stuff has come in. We could do that as a committee meeting, or we could do that. We could make a recommendation to the manager or the administration to convene a forum on or about a certain date. What do you guys think?
Before we talk about the procedure, talk about the proposal.
The proposal would be after the what was the date? June 13th. He said, we find a time to play it safe. Maybe we say July 15th. We get the permits that have been in. We set a deadline for the permits, so the deadline's already set for, I don't know. We set a deadline for June 13th, let's say. and for all the permits, and then we convene the fall sports, the youth sports, which are soccer, football. What are the fall recreational sports, not the school teams?
Soccer and football have priority in the fall. Youth soccer, youth football have priority.
There's a youth football, not, yeah. Youth soccer and youth football, we bring that in.
But then still, youth baseball, softball, and I'm not too sure about lacrosse, still sometimes put some permits in.
All right, so the youth sports, we bring all the youth sports in, which is the second on the list, or even the third on the list.
Well, they're all the ones, yes.
Even the off-season ones. We
Even
bring
the
them in,
off-season.
we bring them in and we give them the opportunity that they've been talking about to try to
Work out this.
apply the formula that we have here in our policy. At the same time, it offers a benefit to families to be able to maybe get their kids to participate in multiple sports instead of just being stuck on having to decide for one.
Well, that's, to me, so, to me, that's not a priority, but
All right, forget about that.
But Mike, your point,
I mean, I
do you have
think,
any response to
I
that?
just think for this meeting, what I was really curious about was a better understanding of the priority use of the fields. It seems like there is a policy. It's a beast of a policy to manage because there's so many moving parts, there's so many groups, there's so many needs, and there's very, very few spaces. I think the woman who left said it best, that transparency leads to trust, and I think that's what needs to be built amongst the youth groups and the recreation department more so than us. And that's what I'm leaving here feeling, that there is a policy, it's in place. I'd like to know, I like the idea of kind of an audit, but I don't know that there's much that we can do in terms of setting policy at this point based on, there is a policy, it's pretty clear, and we don't have a lot of space. That's how I'm kind of feeling.
So we just
Mike,
throw our hands up.
No, I think what we're looking at here is a potential meeting that includes a limited number of people at a certain date to hash out in specific about what their need. What I'm concerned about is actually if youth soccer says we need X, Y, and ABC, and that's what we need. I don't want them to come in at a meeting and say, okay, now that we're figuring this out, we want to add more to it. You need to be able to sort of put out what you, bare minimum of what you need.
Right.
And then the folks over there in the football need to put out the bare minimum of what they need, and then those groups plus the two off-season sports or non-traditional sports put out the bare minimum they need, and then we should see after they all get what they need, what's left and who's it going to go to. And I think that could be done, and I would say that the committee could make a recommendation that the Recreation Department convene a meeting as of June 13th of just the 4 sports teams that were youth teams, football, for soccer, and then baseball and lacrosse have fall team. And that meeting that is where things get hashed out. And I think we could make a motion to that effect.
Yes, sir.
Counselor, we're forgetting the high school program, and I think it's still too early. I don't mind the Fab Five. I think it's fine to talk about it, but the high school drives the bus.
My intention was that this would be after they give you the he said June 13th, so my intention was that after that's locked in.
After you get locked in.
Right, that's game schedules and stuff, but we didn't work out any practice time at all. We usually meet with the coaches for, like I said, 10 hours, right after I get those schedules.
So when is it going to work? Give us an idea.
I like July 15th.
That's fine, if
that
that's
works.
what you like.
I mean, if that works, that gives us some...
That gives the youth sports, the youth sports have already submitted their permit by the time they all go on, the kids go on vacation. So that gives youth sports opportunities for all of August, basically, in the last half of July, to just show up for the meeting and bash our heads together to try to to divvy up what's left.
Right.
And then whatever, and then if then we can actually really see if the policy leaves anything open for anybody else. If it doesn't, I mean, I would have to say we should be aware that that could be a situation, and I mean, keep our eyes on that ball. We don't want to push the Reds and the softball out of town.
Some don't.
Some don't.
Come on, Kenny.
Okay.
All right.
So,
All right, let's.
or hurt
Wait,
anyone's
so I'm making a
feelings.
motion. I'm making a motion. And the motion.
Wait. Oh, okay. Sorry.
The motion is that we're asking the Recreation Department to convene a meeting as of July 15th, or thereafter, near July 15th, of the youth soccer, youth football, and who are the non-traditional, but the fall sports? Baseball and lacrosse. The 4 teams to sit together and look at what is available prior to, bring to that meeting what they need, the minimum of what they need, prior to, after you finish, and to see what you guys can come up with.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I have another.
Do you have another item?
Well, just
Get it too.
I don't know how you want to put these together, but I think that it's the matter that Mr. Boston Sports Club, Ski and Sports, brought up about a permitted field being underutilized, and someone else brought up a cancellation policy. I guess I'd like to hear, from Mr. Santola about that, because I think that could be a good idea, and I don't know, maybe you've already thought of that in the past. I just wanted to hear. Could we break out the sanctity of our committee discussion for a minute, just to allow him?
What are you asking Peter to speak to?
About cancellation policies.
Do you have a policy for canceling?
Well, there is a policy on cancellation, and I'll just mention a couple of things that work well sometimes. And again, Mike has a real tough job, but just for instance, the other day, he notified me, so we had a request of youth lacrosse to utilize the field tonight from 5:30 to 8, because they need a makeup game. And Mike's, was able to release that. So I think it's we do have a policy, but I think people be more aware of, if they're not going to utilize a field, to let us know.
Okay.
I will agree with Mark that when we give permits out, one of the things we ask is give back the times you don't use. Doesn't always happen. So, I'll agree with Mark, some of the hours, but we're not notified. So when we're asked, give us the field from 4 to boom, and we give the field 4 to boom, I agree with them. I sometimes say, you're not going to really use the field 4 to 5, because, so I'm agreeing with that, but nobody gives it back, so it's still on the rolls.
And sometimes they don't know because until later, because they've put out the time to their coaches, and their coaches just haven't
But
taken
they
it.
should know.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. The schedules do a nice job, but I think each youth organization scheduler needs an assistant, because sometimes we miss it, sometimes it's a conflict. So I think the important thing is to give back the time, but we do have a policy right there, 24-hour cancellation period.
Okay, so let me add on to that recommendation, that part of the discussion be a discussion amongst the 5 leagues of how they can better coordinate changes in the schedule and make that information available to Peter on as soon as possible. And I don't know if that affects you so much.
No, it does. We could do a better job at things too. We get curveballs all the time with stuff. A bus doesn't show, and
then the fire, no place, right? They
Right,
forfeit.
right.
So later,
That just happened recently. We also just I don't mean to belabor the time here, but we have coaches that work too. So it's not like if we lose something from 3 to 5, the ideal time is the 6 to 8. We have lacrosse and say it's 6 to 8, but I can't necessarily move that up to 3 to 5 because the coaches that coach 6 to 8 are not teachers. So they're working and they're getting out late at times.
so what happens when all of a sudden, I can understand this, that if something happens and the space is not being used, are we that flexible that we can move people into it at that short notice?
Well, I think we have to have a waiting list.
Huh?
So we have to have a waiting list that follows the priorities.
How does a coach call up all their players and say, oh, we just got a field From 3 to 5 on,
So, here's a for instance, last night,
okay,
we were scheduled to use Vic at 8 o'clock.
right.
I had Winchester call me at 6:30. Don't have enough place.
To
Can't
show up
play.
at 8 o'clock.
So I I emailed Peter as soon as I could, and Kim, and said I can't use the field. I'm giving it back. But who's he gonna get to use it in that short a notice?
Right. And then the public sees the field not being used and
And the
says,
light's on, you know?
say, why
Please
is
turn
it?
off the light.
But you couldn't use it for practice?
Again, I wasn't coaching.
Oh, you weren't
Peter
coaching.
and I already had this conversation, because if it was my team, we would have practiced.
Yeah, it's,
Right.
you got the space, use the
My
space.
coach
so
didn't, the coach did not want to practice.
Fire him.
Councilman Lumber, just on some good notes, we have had, I mean, don't think everything's gloom and doom. There was a nice communication between the youth soccer coordinator schedule and lacrosse, where there was a give and take, and that's perfect. But I think youth soccer had the field, youth lacrosse asked them, can they have it? But all I asked is for the youth soccer to release it, and then youth soccer took it. So that's a nice thing. That
So
has
maybe
happened.
we
So
could,
Tony, are you saying that you're adding that, you want to add that into the original motion, the discussion of
yes.
cancellation policies?
Cancellation policy, not so much a policy, but a
Yeah,
way,
discussion.
better discussion about how that could work.
So everybody takes that home for homework, and I have one other thing.
Okay, go ahead.
The other thing was, I don't know, I don't think we should include it as part of this, because we've got enough to do with this, but I do think it's worth further discussion, the school policy on the field. I think that if things were working right with a park ranger on site to direct these straggling kids who come on during one of your practices, it should be handled. It should be handled just like anybody else who's using the field and someone comes on when they have a permit. And I don't know if we can refer that to another committee meeting at another time. But
Education committee, but it's my feeling at least that the fields, when the high school or when the Watertown public schools are using these fields, that's who's using the field, and they should be allowed to have the flexibility of how they use the field.
I wasn't saying that they shouldn't have flexibility, but if you have just a baseball team practicing with 18 guys on one side, and there was space, like even a small space on the other side, they wouldn't be allowed to. No one else would ever be allowed to use that space, just as a matter of the policy.
Right.
And are you saying that that's a good policy?
I think what I'm saying is that's the prerogative of the schools, that we have to give the Watertown schools first crack at it. And I'm not sure that they're ready at this point. Mike, I'm not going to speak for you, but we're not ready to start saying, well, we're going to use it, and then from the 40-yard line out, you stick in youth lacrosse. Do you want that?
You don't want it to be an unsafe situation, but there might be moments when that could work.
Or what if they're high school kids? I mean, that's the point I bring up, is like my kid goes to Watertown High School and he goes down to that corner to kick the ball in the net or to do some sprints, and some other coach says, we have the permit, you can't hang out here.
Well, I don't want to discuss it now. I just think
that we
want
should
to have
bring that
post
discussion
about
up.
the discussion.
Yep.
I think it's a good point, it should be considered somewhere, I appreciate it.
I think that comes into play for number 3, honestly. From what I see, it's how you prioritize what is traditional in-season sport compared to non-traditional, because, obviously, Peter, I don't know if you can have a little bit more insight to that, and to prioritize it, just because that is a higher tier up on the list, because I only mention this because we've obviously been cited for something, and springtime is a traditional baseball sport, and I don't know if you go by what's traditional sport in high school, what's professionally.
Yeah.
If you had any insight on that.
I mean, it doesn't, although it should, but basically that's when we're talking about the youth groups.
Okay.
It's contentious. So, like Mark said, and a lot of people go 2 seasons. So we go with the high school and college season. And as a college AD, we call it traditional, non-traditional. So you have a general season that they have priority, and then a season that they still play, but they have a secondary priority. I get it clearly with the Reds baseball and softball, it's really a spring-summer deal. And we have less really concern in the summer for the most part. It's really like the spring. And then for the softball, just the, the first few weeks in, in September. Yeah, you guys have been very good.
Okay,
There's been a lot of movement.
But there is a request from the council, from Councilor
So I guess-
Dusko, that we put into the minutes that a discussion should be had about the utilization of the fields when the Watertown School is using the fields.
Well, do you want to keep that in our committee, or you want to send that to
Mike,
education?
you want it? Or?
Let me just understand this. So, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is, I'm the boys soccer team, and I have the permit for the field from 5 to 7. I should be better coordinating use of the field with the field hockey team, or with anyone who wants to use the field.
If I'm only going to use half the turf and the other half is unused, we should entertain the idea to allow the rec department to let someone else permit that other half of the field.
Maybe even a youth organization.
Whoever, yeah.
That,
Within safe,
yeah.
it should be safe. I don't want the fly balls.
Coach doesn't know that, though, does he, Mike? Does the coach know that, all right, Wednesday, I'm only going to use half the field?
I don't know. I think this is opening something up, to be honest with you.
I'm not ready and
I'm not ready.
comfortable for this, because I think we're gonna have a lot of time and energy on the other piece personally. And I hear what you're saying, and I get it. It's a big complex. I live right there too, and I want my kids playing outside and not just be told to run off, but
The comment I have is actually much smaller than that.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know that I'm feeling comfortable about. I think what I'd like to see better, to be honest, is, and it sounds like it's already happening informally, is the sports teams, the high school sports teams working better together about sharing that space first, before I'm ready to say, and now I'm ready to make the jump to other, either formal or informal use in addition to. That's how I feel.
I wasn't talking about informal, but I'll make the motion. You guys don't have to second and vote for it. I'll make the motion.
So what is the motion?
To refer, I'll keep it in Human Services since we've already started the
Okay,
discussion.
so you're making a motion for a referral to
Us.
Human
To us.
Services. And we would obviously invite the school committee, the appropriate school committee, subcommittee, to discuss potential opening up permitted facilities when the school department, I don't know, I'm tired.
Joint use, I think. If you
Joint use of permitted school permitted facilities.
And that's a recommendation the town council referred that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And second?
So that's my motion.
You second that?
I mean, I'm willing to have a conversation around it, so I will second that.
All right.
I'm very hesitant, but I'm willing to have
Conversations, discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
Can I just make,
No.
I just feel it. What's the purpose of the meeting? What do you guys want to achieve? Do you want to do Peter's job?
Which meeting?
That's what's gonna happen.
Do you want to do Peter's job?
No.
Then let Peter do his job. Right now, I think you guys are treading in that area.
Well,
I feel,
think
listening to you, treading in that area, that you're getting involved with scheduling and dictating to this group what's going to happen, getting this group involved. I think you're going beyond your scope of where you should be doing. Peter's got his job to do. These coaches in here should be working with Peter. You govern it, you monitor it. You want to come back for a playback later on. How did things work out? That's where I see it. Right now, I think you maybe try in some areas you.
I think if we are not having the committee participate in the recommended meeting, that it's with Peter and the 4 teams, and that they should get together and start to hash things out after we hear from the school department and what they need. And let's see what happens after that meeting takes place in June, and the committee could reconvene to talk about the results of that meeting.
If things don't work, then of course you guys get involved.
Right.
Absolutely.
But
That's why we're here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly why we're here.
Okay. Sir, you've been quiet all day and all.
On that dual motion, you're talking utilizing Victory Field for 2 teams, one specifically high school teams, correct? Or a youth organization.
Yeah, the
Now,
proposal, yeah, that's
discussion,
right.
so, I'm a softball coach. In the fall and the spring, we're not able to get on the field early enough because of the weather. So we utilize the corner of the Orchard Street Park. If you have a baseball team out there and you're hitting the ball in the spring, it can be a very dangerous situation when you put those. Now, I'm a high school kid, and I have kids standing there watching the high school baseball, and we work great together.
Yeah.
But if you put a youth group out there and somebody connects with a ball, somebody's going to get hurt down there. And I don't think that's a good path to follow
I don't
in
either.
this situation.
I would think that would be something that meeting would
I
really
don't
hit
think
on
that's a
early
good
on.
idea.
So this let me be clear, that the proposal that Councilor Dushku said, and the Councilor that totally seconded, and that I opposed, was to have a discussion of this committee to talk about a discussion of how the possible dual use of the fields when the Watertown Public Schools has the permit. Now, that's a discussion, and I don't think you should have that discussion.
I
But
think
that's,
it's a bad path to start.
that's the discussion that, Peter.
I'm sorry, Counselor, but if you do that, then any group who has a permit, anybody could just walk on the field. I mean, the reason we have a permit is to have them, so if youth soccer has a game, okay, then somebody else could go on the field. You just really gotta be careful. Don't just think it's a high school situation. We have guidelines already here that if you have the permit, that field is yours.
Right.
Nobody else should be
The
on it.
intention is to be very careful and to talk about
I
it.
think it's,
Carefully.
and I think it's very messy. I think it's very messy.
Okay. I
Okay,
don't-
just want to thank
So we
you.
have, the committee's voted 2-1 on this one, so it means the committee will have to set a time to have that discussion.
No, we have to ask the council.
Yeah, we'll go to the town
That
council.
goes to the town council, okay, to have that referral. So we'll see what happens. But I think that we have accomplished one thing tonight, which was, besides everybody having an opportunity to offer their input, we have a better understanding of how the school department works through. We have a better understanding of what the needs are of the 4 youth organizations are. And we threw a couple of ideas out, and we landed on one, which was an attempt to build some transparency and some trust. And so that as of July, sometime after July 15th, there will be a meeting. We have proposed, and it has been approved, that this will have to go through the council, but that the recreation department hold that meeting with the 4 teams, with the 4 leagues. And-
Wait. It has to go through council?
No, that's right, it's not a policy.
Yeah.
No, it's just our right. To just be in the report. Okay, and we voted 3-0 for that. Okay, well, first off, it's now 5 of 10. And thank you very much, everybody, for sitting so quietly and carefully throughout the meeting. We appreciate it. And can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moves. Second.
All in favor? Aye.